The witch's fiery death, you're truly cold-blooded. Ah. Shang Wuxin was looking at the man sitting across, her face expressionless as he spoke. Even when she was betrayed, she still didn't reveal a distressed expression. But nobody knew that within her sleeves both hands had gotten white. A handsome man with peach blossom eyes was sitting directly opposite Shang Wuxin. A momentary sadness flashed within his eyes, but it was quickly covered up by a strong desire. Wasn't it for this day that he had concealed himself, hiding by Shang Wuxin's side for so many years? So long as he killed this woman, he would experience a meteoric rise in his career from now on. He could even rise in the ranks and become the new chief of the police department, in charge of the entire A city. Shang Wuxin, you witch? The man looked resentfully at the woman he had poisoned himself, and laughed as he said, "Did you know? My parents were killed by you. For so many years I've always wanted to kill you, did you know? Staying by your side was so disgusting. I absolutely don't love you." Sitting on the scarlet sofa, Shang Wuxin, dressed in red, was looking at this man, whom she had genuinely liked. Her heart was grieving. In front of her was a man who had given her poison hoping to kill her. He was called Du Xingfeng, her secret boyfriend. Why secret? Because she had made too many enemies. She was afraid that someone would hurt her man. That's why she had intentionally kept many fake lovers around, all in order to protect Du Xingfeng. He, Shang Wuxin laughed out loud, a beautiful sound that could make people shiver all over. She laughed for a long time, before slowly letting her gaze return to the man sitting across. Shang Wuxin shakily stood up and walked to his front. The man tensed for a brief moment, but thinking of the highly toxic poison already inside Shang Wuxin, it would be impossible for her to kill him. He remained motionless as he looked at the demoness, whom everyone feared, dying in front of him. Shang Wuxin gently caressed that pair of peach blossom eyes of Du Xingfeng. She had to admit, whether it was Du Xingfeng's appearance or his fake personality, both were to her liking. That was why she had disregarded his dangerous identity to keep him by her side. You're certainly their son, ah. You could actually conceal yourself by my side for so many years, and almost made me believe you really loved me. Shang Wuxin laughed tenderly, as she stroked from the man's eyes down to the bridge of his nose. Really let me down, ah. It's hard for me to become fond of a man, and it turned out like this. Regarding this man, it wasn't love at first sight for Shang Wuxin. She had only recently started to appreciate him. Her heart was still very guarded against him, but the two of them were attached to each other for 10 years, from 17 till 27 years old now. In the beginning, she had been extremely cautious of him and had always pushed him away, but she had slowly relaxed afterward, not carrying a weapon around him and no longer privately inspecting the food whenever she ate with him. But because of this trust, she had suffered such a significant blow now. You witch, you've had a strong guard around your heart from such a young age. How else would I be able to kill you? Du Xingfeng was looking at the woman, who had been stunning at 17 and still uncommonly beautiful at 27. Undeniably, his heart truly had been moved by Shang Wuxin. It was very hard for a man not to be tempted by such a woman. Not to mention how well she had treated him for so long. Too bad, they were born to be enemies. Whether it was his parents' enmity, or her criminal world versus his law-abiding identity, there shouldn't have been love between them. Shang Wuxin didn't seem the least bit saddened. Even with the highly toxic poison inside her, she still had an indifferent and serene expression. Her fingers slid down the bridge of his nose, arriving at his thin lips, then she kissed him the same way she had always done. The only difference was this man's lack of earnest response, and the absence of pleasure within Shang Wuxin. Ending the one-sided kiss, Shang Wuxin sighed as she gazed at the man. They'd been together for so many years, yet except for kissing and embracing, they'd never progressed a single step further. Previously, she had believed that he was considerate of her past trauma, but now... Shang Wuxin, did you know? Your kiss really disgusts me. Du Xingfeng looked at the woman in front of him and stated with a malicious smile. He had always showed a modest gentleman's appearance to Shang Wuxin, but now exposed his true colors and ambition. A woman who's been raped by her foster father as a child, did you really think I liked kissing you? Du Xingfeng was watching the woman's steady expression, feeling depressed at heart. They had already reached this point, yet she was neither sad nor afraid. It was unfair. Du Xingfeng went on, "A woman like you is really filthy. How could I possibly touch you? Alright. Everyone knows you have so many lovers, you're just a slut?" A harsh glint flashed deep in Shang Wuxin's eyes, but unfortunately, this man didn't notice. Otherwise he wouldn't have mentioned Shang Wuxin's most detested memory that had once been her nightmare. "It's really regrettable, ah?" Shang Wuxin stood up suddenly. With her firm and graceful posture, it was as if there was no trace of poison inside her. She took a seat further away and laughed as she said, "I'd meant to let you keep your life initially, but now, I don't care one bit for it." Seeing Shang Wuxin like this, Du Xingfeng got a little scared. He was about to pull out the gun hidden in his clothes, but she didn't wait for him as she thrust a pen into his throat, cutting off his breath on the spot. Du Xingfeng's eyes were still wide open. Up until his death, he couldn't have expected that Shang Wuxin was able to kill people like this. Moreover, he couldn't understand why she had no issues after drinking the poison. Such skills in martial arts, as if taken out of a movie. But it was a pity that Du Xingfeng would never get the chance to appreciate them again. "Miss?" A woman suddenly rushed in from outside. She was Shang Wuxin's trusted assistant, as well as the housekeeper of this mansion. Looking at her young lady weakly sitting there, the woman's eyes filled with tears. Shang Wuxin smiled indifferently. Her complexion turned pale, completely different from her composed look earlier. "Wu Wei." Shang Wuxin glanced at the woman and stated, "Take him away, don't let him dirty my place. After I die, the Shang family will be given to you. I know you're not interested in it, but its influence isn't small. So even when I'm no longer around, you can still do whatever you want." "Miss?" Wu Wei looked at the charming smile on Shang Wuxin's face and her tears abruptly flowed down. This was the young lady she worked for. People only saw her as ruthless and fearful, but in her own view, the young lady had led such an exhausting life. Shang Wuxin beckoned with her hand, her manner dignified and imposing. Wu Wei gazed deeply at the young lady, then dragged the corpse on the ground away from the room. She departed from the mansion that belonged to the young lady of the Shang family, the place anyone wanted to come in, without knowing how empty and dreadful it was inside. But not long after Wu Wei had left the mansion, she noticed fires spreading within the building, its intensity fearful. Wu Wei stood there watching, tears streaming down her face. Then she dropped to her knees, shouting out, "Miss?" Shang Wuxin was sitting in the room and looking at a photo on the table. The picture showed a little girl's simple-minded appearance. That was her when she was 5 years old. It was the only photo of her, because she had never smiled like this ever since. Everybody knew the Shang family. Whether it was wealth or influence, they were second to none. But people didn't know that the Shang family was an ancient martial clan, possessing inner force and martial arts similar to the ones in wuxia novels. The only difference was, the Shang family weren't some secret clan, they rather competed for influence within the noisy city. She, Shang Wuxin, was a child from a branch family. During a clan gathering, it was decided that the Shang clan head would receive her as an adopted daughter. Initially, she was very happy she could enter the clan head's family, but when her original parents learned of the decision, their complexions had tensed, their faces full of sympathy. Yet they had still let her enter this much-admired Shang family's mansion. She didn't understand why her parents looked so strange then, but she understood soon afterward. On her 8th birthday, her adoptive father took her from the training ground to hold a birthday party for her, with her parents included. After the party, she was taken to a room by her adoptive father. That was a humiliation she would never be able to forget. She was violated by her supposed adoptive father. She was only a child, the pain, she didn't know exactly what was happening, but she knew it was shameful. She was yelling for her parents in pain, longing for someone to save her, but her parents turned a deaf ear right outside the door. For their own benefit and standing, they had looked on unfeelingly as they sent their young daughter to a 30-year-old man's bed. She had turned numb from the extreme pain. Shang Wuxin had suffered many injuries after that day, but they weren't as painful as that time. Thinking of dying? She had certainly not thought of that. At the time when she had crawled out of the bed dripping with blood, She knew she would kill this adoptive father, she would kill her so-called parents. She wanted to be formidable, to become a demoness whom everyone feared. It took her 5 years to learn the Shang clan's secret martial arts and become a genuine master. She killed her adoptive father splendidly and captured the entire Shang clan's power into her own hands. She had made sure her parents were driven away from the family, and with no way out, they had jumped to their deaths. She had transformed into a formidable demoness. But her heart was as quiet as stagnant water, her body was also slowly drying up. So laughable, obviously a youngster, yet her body was drying up. Indeed, it was because once she had started getting stronger, her adoptive father was afraid she would turn into a hindrance one day, and had thus poisoned her. As a result, she simply couldn't live long, even modern medicine was unable to save her. Later, she met Du Xingfeng. She was fond of this man, because he was the only man who wasn't afraid of her. Moreover, he was very adept at inviting her favor. It wasn't love, but she couldn't give up his warmth, so they started a secret love affair. Since she wouldn't be alive for much longer, she had planned to divide the Shang family in half between Du Xingfeng and her subordinate Wu Wei. But unfortunately, reality gave her a slap in the face, mocking her naivety. She was Shang Wuxin, heartless. Why would she need a heart, have emotions? In fact, Du Xingfeng didn't know that even if he didn't kill Shang Wuxin today, she would not live for more than a few months. Yet he ended up like this. Du Xingfeng's poison was certainly inside her, but he wasn't aware of her martial arts, so his loss was inevitable. She had never told him, because it hadn't been necessary. But now it had let her clearly see his true colors. She knew she would die today, and would disappear just like that. The fire spread around Shang Wuxin, the orange flame complementing her red dress made for an incomparably desolate picture. Burn it, take all the filth and burn it along with her. Shang Wuxin felt the pain of her own burning skin, seeping through to her tormented heart. Her face showed a beautiful smile, pure like the one she'd had back when she was 5. Crown Prince Shang Wuxin, a boy seemingly in his teens, was sprawled inside a dim and cluttered cavern. He was lying down on the ice-cold ground, dressed in a dirty bright yellow brocade robe that was creased and damaged in some places. If someone came at this time, they would have found that the boy wasn't breathing and his entire body had begun to stiffen up. Time passed slowly. When night descended, the boy's fingers twitched slightly, almost like an illusion. But after a while, the boy's entire hand trembled, and a little later his delicate eyebrows wrinkled gently. A pair of tightly shut eyes suddenly opened, revealing black like ink, dazzling pupils that seemed to be able to see through anyone at a glance. Shang Wuxin looked up at the top of the hole she was in. After a long time, she felt her body slowly warming up, and changed to a sitting position with some difficulty. She took in her surroundings, her manner calm and indifferent. Shang Wuxin stretched out her hand, looking at its youthful appearance. These young and delicate hands seemed to belong to a young master who'd never done manual labor. Shang Wuxin chuckled, then she burst out in laughter. Ha ha ha. The sound was tinged with sorrow and arrogance, echoing in the dark cavern unnaturally. Shang Wuxin laughed for a long time before she stopped and threw a self-deprecating glance at the darkness around her. She actually hadn't died? As expected, even hell didn't want her, because she had killed too many and sinned too much? But it didn't matter, it was enough that she was still alive now. And she wanted to live this life as she pleased. Shang Wuxin examined her own body. She couldn't see the face, but the body was very weak and thin. Obviously a 15-year-old, yet looked more like an 11 to 12-year-old. She knew this body's owner was His Highness, the Crown Prince of Shang country, a seemingly formidable status. Unfortunately, this Shang Wuxin had been constantly ill and with a weak body from birth. Moreover, he lacked courage and was always getting picked on by the emperor's children and their followers. He would only hide away afterward, feeling wronged and crying. Shang Wuxin touched her chest suddenly, finding it very flat. Her heart was a little startled. Did she really turn into a man? Then her hand felt around below the waist, finding it completely empty. So this crown prince was originally a female. As a female, she should have been a princess, yet she actually disguised as a man and became the crown prince. There had to be a deeper plot at play that even the original body was unaware of. Shang Wuxin sorted through the many memories in her head, also realizing how this crown prince had lost her life. Although Shang Wuxin was the crown prince, she was only a powerless dummy. Even the emperor seemed uncaring and indifferent to this son, but then why had he let Shang Wuxin sit in the position of crown prince? Because Shang Wuxin was female, she was always afraid of getting exposed, and she loathed her own identity as a man. So she was always holed up inside the crown prince residence, refusing to come out. The head eunuch at her residence had been persuading her to go outside for a long time, but the moment she went out she had ran into some official's son. That young master had ridiculed and shamed her without restraint, yet Shang Wuxin actually hadn't dared to get angry and could only return to the crown prince residence in tears. Back in the residence, Shang Wuxin had closed herself in the room, without eating nor drinking, just worrying all day. At that time, a maidservant, who was close to Shang Wuxin, came to wait on her and said that there was a very effective wishing tree in the valley behind the royal mountain. If she went there to make a wish, it could make her dream come true. The naive Shang Wuxin really got convinced, and quietly sneaked out to the valley by herself. But a variety of wild animals and vipers frightened her into running away till she fell into this place. Coincidentally, she got poisoned and died on the spot, welcoming the brand new soul of Shang Wuxin. Shang Wuxin stroked her new cheek as she silently marveled on the inside. This Shang Wuxin was really silly. That maidservant was definitely installed by someone in the crown prince residence. Such a stupid trick, yet Shang Wuxin easily got fooled and lost her life. Shang Wuxin's greatest wish was to restore her female identity, find a husband and raise some children. Dying was just as well, otherwise she would have suffered sooner or later due to her mindset. Resting for a very long time, she combed through a lot of the events in her mind. Though her brain was still groggy, and many of Shang Wuxin's memories were chaotic, that did not affect her determination. She could take her time to slowly recall everything later, but preserving her life was more important now. Damn it! Shang Wuxin cursed quietly as she considered that having crossed over, her martial arts would have disappeared, and it would be very difficult to regain them. Standing up, she used her inner force and discovered that the original Shang Wuxin actually had martial arts. Furthermore, they weren't low quality. In spite of possessing such high-quality martial arts, she was still bullied like that, and could also only flee from wild animals. From the bottom of her heart, Shang Wuxin thought the original person was senseless. In this kind of world ruled by the law of the jungle, it would have been bad enough had she been born to an ordinary family. But not only was she a child in the royal family, she was the crown prince. With this kind of disposition, it was a miracle that she'd survived till now. Encounter at night within the dense foliage of the mountain woods, one could sometimes hear a beast's low roar. The crescent moon was hanging high in the sky, where dark clouds floated, and the whole mountain was transformed into pitch-black scenery. The quiet in this kind of atmosphere provoked even more terror. Shang Wuxin breathed out softly. Her every step was nimble, not making a single sound. She had gone hungry for several days already, and more importantly, she had clearly detected that her body was poisoned and in poor health. If she met a wild animal at this moment, even if she didn't die, she would lose half her life. Even when her body was weak and she felt faint, Shang Wuxin's back was perfectly straight, head held high. Though she cut a sorry figure right now, she was still like the king of this forest. That pair of wild animal-like keen eyes were constantly on the alert as she looked over the surroundings. If any situation arose, she was prepared to fight back. Even if she was currently no good, she would at least be able to skin an animal. Shang Wuxin's frosty eyes looked at a corpse-like motionless man lying down ahead. Since she still hadn't adapted to her body, even if the original's martial arts was very high, the night prevented her from clearly seeing the appearance of the man on the ground. But it didn't matter, because Shang Wuxin didn't plan to mind other people's business. In this life, she only wanted to be a heartless person. Shang Wuxin, heartless. Whether it was the previous her, or the current her, she should stay true to her own name. Just as she was about to expressionlessly walk over this corpse, the corpse suddenly groaned. However, that didn't change Shang Wuxin's mind as she went on walking. She needed to return to the Crown Prince residence as soon as possible and take control of her own birthright. Shang Wuxin was well aware that no matter where or when, status and influence were essential. Even when she was reborn, she didn't intend to lead a dull, secluded life. As long as she grasped the authority in her hands, she could command her own fate and truly qualify to become an unrestrained, Wuxin person. However, the corpse on the ground grabbed Shang Wuxin's bare foot, causing her whole body to emit a thick sense of hostility. Shang Wuxin's foot turned, directly giving a kick to the man, who had his eyes open. The kick was aimed for his solar plexus. If it landed, in addition to his severe injury, he basically wouldn't be able to survive. But that man was obviously not an ordinary person. If he was, how would he possibly find himself here, and with such a serious wound as well? As Shang Wuxin's kick approached his chest, he swiftly rolled away. Though it looked strained, Shang Wuxin could tell his martial arts weren't low, and his endurance was very strong. Still so alert when he had such a bad injury, moreover, being capable of such an accurate evasion. An obscure gleam flashed through Shang Wuxin's eyes. She brought her body to a squat unhurriedly. She wasn't slow on purpose, but her body had received so many injuries, even squatting down was very difficult. The dark clouds parted, gradually revealing the crescent moon, spreading some light in the mountain woods. Shang Wuxin borrowed the moonlight to take a look at the person on the ground. Entering her sight was a man with demonic beauty. His long black hair was untied, scattered behind him on the ground littered with dry leaves, yet it didn't appear dirty or messy. It was smoothly spread out like fine silk. Under the delicate, feminine-looking brows was a pair of bewitching eyes that could steal a person's soul. Because they were on guard and were showing a killing intent, the outer corners were slightly raised up, increasing their allure even more. His pale red lips were gently pursed in a faint smile, but Shang Wuxin could sense the immense killing intent aimed at her right now. This evildoer's heart was certainly black. Skin fair like snow seemed to give off a silvery glow, but Shang Wuxin could smell the thick scent of blood on him. It was the unique scent of someone who had murdered too many, unable to wash off the stains. Han Xianhao had lost consciousness just recently, due to his injury. In a daze, he'd felt someone passing by, thus he'd instinctively wanted to grab the presented opportunity. But he'd unexpectedly sensed a dense aura of death, so he endured the pain gushing from his chest, and hastily dodged to the side. Even if he was severely hurt, he knew that if he hadn't dodged he'd already be registering in hell. If he wasn't injured, how would he possibly be reduced to this state? He decided he would absolutely kill this person. Han Xianhao looked at the man slowly squatting down, his whole body brimming with killing intent. He highly loathed other people standing too close to him. Whether it was men or women, no one dared to get close to him, or else they'd be slain immediately. It was a first for him to be so helpless. When he noticed that person approaching while assessing him, Han Xianhao also started sizing him up. But he actually got a shock. It was the first time that Han Xianhao found a man even more refined and beautiful than himself. In a flash, his gaze locked onto the lethargic youth beside his body, who was fixedly sizing him up with narrowed eyes. His robe was tattered and the color was somewhat faded, yet it didn't damage the youth's imposing manner even a bit. It made him appear especially dazzling instead, like a brilliant natural pearl, with a splendid noble air, unrestrained to the greatest extent. But it wasn't the man's appearance that surprised him, it was his eyes. The black eyes of the man squatting by his side shone as if the stars from the night sky had fallen in. So deep and detached, one couldn't see the bottom. The pupils were bright and clear, looking a little indifferent. It seemed as if no one within his sight could enter his eyes. At this moment, Han Xianhao suddenly wished he could appear in that pair of eyes. The next moment, Han Xianhao wondered whether he was insane. Why would he have such thoughts? He was an extremely selfish person. When had he ever felt like this for someone else? Han Xianhao nipped the preposterous thoughts from just now in the bud. But once the peaceful without a ripple ocean in his heart had been disturbed by the wind, how would it not have a mark left behind? Want to live? Shang Wuxin looked at this more beautiful than a woman male. She had seen many handsome men and beautiful women in her life, but seeing such a person, whose sex couldn't be easily distinguished, was a first for her. Shang Wuxin didn't know what her own appearance was like, but she believed that if this man was a woman, he'd be known as a first under heaven beauty. But once Shang Wuxin returned to the crown prince residence and saw her own face, she would drop this notion. Han Xianhao looked at the crouching man. The man's expression lacked the slightest emotion, as if he was observing something dead. Han Xianhao couldn't deny, if he provoked this odd man's anger, he would definitely get killed. Normally he would be fearless, but not now. He simply wouldn't be able to evade the next killing strike. I must live, Han Xianhao stated as he watched the man by his side. The pain made him slightly crease his brows, but he couldn't let it show, since that man's disposition was too strange. He still didn't know whether he was an enemy or a friend. Shang Wuxin's lips slightly curved. It was obviously meant to be a smile, yet it didn't seem one bit like a smile. She observed the man on the ground appreciatively. He had skill, willpower, and the ability to read the mood. She was aware that if she wanted to hold onto the crown prince position, she needed to have useful people at hand. Though this person was a very good candidate, Shang Wuxin wasn't arrogant enough to believe she could use him, because this kind of man was aloof and wouldn't be tamed. However, even if he couldn't be tamed, it was possible to make use of him. Shang Wuxin knew he may enter a cooperative relationship with her, but not a friendship. Because she was very clear that while he looked like a delicate, bewitching demon, he was actually cold-blooded and ruthless. Such a person could not become a friend. Moreover, Shang Wuxin disdained the word friendship. I can help you. Shang Wuxin roughly examined the man's wound, finding out that he hadn't only received this extremely serious internal injury, but there were also bruises of all sizes on his body, with some of them affecting the muscles and bones. If he wasn't treated as soon as possible, he'd suffer repercussions even if he kept his life. Han Xianhao felt his own severely wounded body, and took a look at his surroundings. Then he once again glanced at the seemingly waiting for an answer youth, but it was obvious the youth basically didn't care what his answer was. While he had clearly said he could help him, it seemed just as likely he could kill him at any time. Conditions? What do you want me to pay? Han Xianhao asked, smiling as he looked at the youth. The smile made Han Xianhao's face even more enticing. Whether men or women, it would be rare to find someone who could resist this kind of appearance, yet he'd never used his own face as a weapon. Today he needed to, but regretfully, the seemingly very young adolescent remained unmoved by his breathtaking appearance. If Han Xianhao wasn't certain that his face had no injuries, he might have doubted whether or not it was disfigured. Once, he had extremely disliked these infatuated by his appearance people. The majority of those who had seen his stunning looks had been dealt with by him. Yet now he was hoping this man would like his appearance, even though he himself couldn't understand why he would have such a feeling. Admiration flashed through Shang Wuxin's heart. That man was indeed very clever. There was no free lunch under heaven. The man obviously understood this principle very well. TSK, it was a real pity. If such a person became her subordinate, he could definitely become her right-hand man. But this much was also good enough. If I have a need in the future, you do 3 things for me. Shang Wuxin said indifferently, but killing intent rose deep within her eyes. If he refused or made a fake promise, she would immediately end his life. Han Xianhao saw the man's eyes. He had to decline. Due to his own former temperament, he had to decline, since he couldn't allow anyone to threaten him or hold his favors hostage. But this time, he didn't refuse. He sensed that if he did, he would not only throw away his life, but also lose out on something. Within the extent of my abilities, within the scope of what I find acceptable. Han Xianhao spoke in his lofty, cold manner. Good. Shang Wuxin's eyes sparkled with a strange light. Chapter 5. Treatment in the cave. Han Xianhao fumed with rage as he watched the back of the youngster walking in front of him. This was the angriest he'd been in a long time. Even when he got injured due to someone's schemes, he still wasn't indignant, yet now he was truly pissed. After he made a deal with the youngster in front of him, Han Xianhao had lost consciousness again. As a killer, he shouldn't have even made such a deal, let alone lose his consciousness in someone else's presence. But who knew why? He felt that although this youth was very cold and detached, he wasn't someone who would betray others. A ridiculous notion, wasn't it? However, he woke in pain due to being harshly dragged by the youngster. The sand and pebbles on the ground endlessly scraped against his back, breaking the skin. He thought of the boy's promise to help and treat him. He had also believed he would support him on his back on the way there. But he'd never expected to be treated like an unimportant object to be dragged. What irked him even more was the boy was dragging him by the foot, going so far as tearing a piece of his own clothing to wrap around his hand, as if Han Xianhao was some kind of virus. Han Xianhao was always the one to shun others. When was it that others had ever shunned him? The discomfort of the person being dragged fell onto deaf ears. Shang Wuxin loathed people's touch ever since that year she had turned 8, when she had started shielding herself from others. If she hadn't found the man useful, she wouldn't have bothered saving him. Shang Wuxin dragged Han Xianhao into the cave she had recently left. Since their transaction had been agreed upon, she would, of course, take care of the man. Seeing that he was being dragged into the cave, Han Xianhao was relieved. He felt that if she continued to drag him like this, he wouldn't be afraid of becoming seriously injured, but dead. And although the cave was desolate, it would be able to provide protection against the wind and rain. He didn't believe he would keep his life if he fell ill on top of his current situation. Thump. Shang Wuxin abruptly let go of Han Xianhao. He had mentally prepared himself, but it was difficult to even move with such an injury. On top of that, he was being thrown around in this condition. It was enough to make him want to spit out blood. Han Xianhao smiled coldly, his eyes emitting menace as he watched ominously while the boy was preparing to light a fire. But looking at that busy youth, even with his undoubtedly ice-cold appearance, Han Xianhao felt warm at heart. Han Xianhao thought it was probably because of his heavy injuries that his mind wasn't all there, or else why would he carry so many thoughts and emotions tonight? After Shang Wuxin made a fire, she finally stepped beside Han Xianhao's body and carefully examined his condition. Internal injuries were harder to treat compared to external ones. When the man was unconscious earlier, she had used her internal force. Although she couldn't fully utilize it yet, it was helpful to a point. Shang Wuxin sat behind Han Xianhao, causing his body to stiffen up, as having someone behind him in such a condition was a very dangerous thing to a killer. He tried to relax himself, since he'd already guessed what the boy wanted to do. When he first saw the youth, Han Xianhao was surprised by his looks and temperament, but he didn't think he knew any martial arts. Moreover, the boy himself was definitely in a difficult situation as well. Could it be that he also had people scheming to kill him? Forget it, it wasn't related to him, so why think about it? Shang Wuxin placed both her hands on Han Xianhao's back. Even if she highly disliked this kind of physical contact, now that she had newly arrived in a different world with no capital, she couldn't be picky. Shang Wuxin's hands started to slowly feed the inner force's pure essence into the man's torso, repairing his chest. This method was merely a temporary solution. In the future he would still need to take medication, but for now, it would preserve his life. When the sky gradually brightened, welcoming an early morning, Shang Wuxin withdrew her hands. It wouldn't have taken so long originally, but Shang Wuxin herself had also received a heavy injury. In addition, she hadn't started practicing her previous life's martial arts, but given enough time, her martial arts would surely improve by several measures. Shang Wuxin was aware of her current need to quickly grow stronger. And in the end, that man's inner force was powerful. Han Xianhao sensed that his condition seemed to have improved, also realizing that the young man had helped him. But since it wasn't done in good intentions and only for their mutual benefit, Han Xianhao felt a little upset. Shang Wuxin left the cave without a word. Han Xianhao opened up his mouth to say something but then stopped. He wasn't in a position to ask any questions. At this point, he was actually wishing for this boy to leave his side as soon as possible. Because when he faced this young man, he felt a bit strange. Han Xianhao lied on the ground. The fire was still burning nearby. His external wounds seemed to have gotten worse. Although he was used to being in pain, he'd rarely gotten injured ever since he grew up. Han Xianhao was slowly recovering as he lied on the cold ground. He didn't feel the boy's presence anywhere near. He also needed to go back soon and demand a revenge. However, the youngster had departed without even knowing who he was. Wasn't that boy afraid he would break his promise? While Han Xianhao was ruminating, the sound of footsteps came from the cave's entrance, soft but orderly. Han Xianhao quickly sat up. Although his weapon was already lost, he picked up a wooden stick from nearby. He sat there vigilantly watching the entrance. The one who appeared in Han Xianhao's eyes was that same boy. Although he was obviously too thin, the way he walked was very steady. The sunlight shined from behind the young man, giving him a bright halo. At that moment, Han Xianhao felt it was one of the most beautiful scenes he had ever seen. Han Xianhao's changed you? As he saw the young man walking back into the cave, Han Xianhao secretly felt happy. Why did you come back? Han Xianhao pretended to be indifferent, seemingly regaining his graceful bearings. But he had already changed somewhat. Shang Wuxin did not answer, but instead just placed some herbs in front of Han Xianhao. Han Xianhao looked surprised at the herbs meant for treating his injury, then at this youngster who appeared so frail, yet noble. He even knew about medicine. At this moment, Han Xianhao felt a little curious about the youth's identity. And it was often the case that curiosity led to a deeper emotion. Han Xianhao also didn't count on this cold and strange young man to apply the medicine on him. Once upon a time, he used to dislike being touched, but now when he thought of the youngster applying the medicine for him, an inexplicable feeling sprouted within his chest. He ground the herbs into a thick paste and spread it over his wounds. The wound on his back wasn't that serious, and it was hard for him to reach anyway. As soon as he got out of there, he could take some medicine of his own. He didn't expect the young man to kindly assist him. After he finished, Han Xianhao looked at the young man sitting by the fire. Even the flames illuminating the boy's face couldn't drive away his cold and gloomy aura. What further shocked Han Xianhao were the boy's still bleeding wounds. Why did he gather the herbs but not use them on himself? This young man seemed so smart, yet he was being foolish. Han Xianhao glanced at the leftover herbal paste. He decided to temporarily drop his uncaring disposition. There is more medicine. You can use it. Han Xianhao said to the young man who was sitting motionless. He wasn't aware of his own worried expression or the stiff smile on his face. Shang Wuxin slowly glanced his way, but did not make a move to fetch the medicine. She didn't care about her wounds. More importantly, she needed that pain to feel alive. The pain made sweat trickle down her face, giving her a morbid satisfaction. Yes, she was still alive. That had to be the biggest joke of all. Shang Wuxin's wounds were not threatening. They were the results of the original owner running from fear and falling. But they looked worse because of the blood dripping on her yellow brocade robe. Han Xianhao didn't know what to do with this boy who seemed unable to feel pain. Picking up the herbal paste, he was about to slowly walk over to the boy's side. As for why he moved so slowly, it was due to his internal injury still in the process of healing, which made moving around challenging. He needed time to heal. However, before Han Xianhao could approach him, the boy promptly got up and took a seat further away from him, not even glancing at Han Xianhao. There was only contempt and disregard, as if nothing and no one in the world could enter his eyes. Your wounds? Han Xianhao could admit that he was meddling. He had finally found someone who provoked his interest and made him wish to become acquainted. This young man was no more than a child, and Han Xianhao was older than him, thus he ought to take care of this younger brother. However, before Han Xianhao could finish his sentence, the young man inquired in a chilly voice, "What is your name? Where are you from?" Shang Wuxin asked not because she was bored, but since they had entered a temporary partnership, she needed to know who this man was, so she could find him in the future to keep his end of the deal. She wasn't concerned with anything else. Han Xianhao, he murmured, his voice possessing the same bewitching quality as its owner. An assassin from Hanxing House. He spoke the truth, but he didn't mention that Hanxing House belonged to him and that he was the lord presiding over it. It was not because he didn't trust the young man, but because he could see that the boy simply didn't care. Shang Wuxin didn't remember much and her memories were fragmented. There was a vague awareness that Hanxing House was a formidable organization, But this wasn't the time to dwell on such things. Based on Han Xianhao's high martial arts, this Han Xinghao's wasn't to be underestimated. "You're fine now," Shang Wuxin stated. She had waited in the cave this long just to make sure the guy would survive. It would be too ridiculous if she saved his life, only to have him die in some wild animal's mouth due to her leaving too soon. She didn't like doing business at a loss. Han Xianhao looked at the young man who was about to leave, realizing that their contract had officially started because he'd lived. There was no reason for him to linger behind either. "Who are you? How can I find you?" Han Xianhao blurted out without thinking. He felt like giving himself a slap. Why was he behaving so unusual today? As if he couldn't wait to be of service. Shang Wuxin didn't pause her strides. Her steps were gentle, as if she were treading on clouds. She looked like a graceful fairy who was ready to fly away at any given moment. Her voice was crisp and clear like a pearl dropping onto a jade plate. "You don't need to know who I am. If I require your services, I'll find you and ask for the 3 requests you owe me." The loyal servant chief Hai Shang Wuxin left the cave without hurry. She slowly made her way through the mountain forest, where she detected numerous shadow guards rushing over stealthily, but there was no trace of killing intent. When she realized that, she calmed down. They weren't enemies. Shang Wuxin instantly drew her conclusion. After they discovered Shang Wuxin, the shadow guards swiftly retreated, leaving only a few behind to watch over her. They were most likely there to protect Shang Wuxin. Her lips formed a faint smirk. It seemed as if this crown prince's identity was more interesting than she'd thought. Just who was it that was willing to protect this incompetent crown prince? Shang Wuxin didn't show any reaction regarding the shadow guards who were secretly following her. As if she were unaware of their presence, she kept on walking leisurely. She quickly searched her memories for the location of the crown prince's residence, and filtered through the various people who served at the residence. The shadow guards were taken aback when they looked at the crown prince. Everyone always spoke of the crown prince's incompetence and cowardice. But even when he was wandering around this dense forest, and even with his cheery gait, the shadow guards could sense the imposing aura surrounding the crown prince's body. His figure was obviously tiny, but he gave the impression of someone who looked down on the world from a lofty position. Could such a person really be incompetent? Once Shang Wuxin was out of the forest, she quickly broke away from the shadow guards trailing behind her. The several shadow guards tracing her were in for a shock when they found that the crown prince had vanished into thin air. Just how had he left their line of sight? Each one of them excelled in the martial arts, yet the crown prince was able to quietly escape right beneath their very eyes. Cold sweat soaked their backs. Apparently, the crown prince had discovered them just now. Looking at the dispersing shadow guards, Shang Wuxin slightly smiled to herself. Even if these people weren't malicious, she was still apprehensive. Furthermore, she didn't wish to go back to the crown prince's residence with this disheveled appearance. Therefore, she used her qinggong to quietly slip into the residence and enter the crown prince's bedroom. Since she was a woman dressed up as a man, no one was allowed to enter the crown prince's bedroom. Even when it came to cleaning up the room, the crown prince Shang Wuxin did it herself. That's why there was no one around when Shang Wuxin sneaked inside. The crown prince's bedroom simply didn't resemble what a crown prince's bedroom should be. A hanging screen with a floral design of bees and butterflies, wide and purple muslin canopy floated softly above a large bed, a delicate and elegant desk, a red carpet embroidered with blossoms covering the floor. Some pendants personally crafted by the original Shang Wuxin were also hanging by the windows. Even if the original owner had been disguised as man, it could be plainly seen that she was girlish down to her bones. The room itself was this nonsensical. Shang Wuxin was dissatisfied with it at just a mere glance. She slowly walked over to the wardrobe and opened it to see it fully packed with robes, most of them yellow with some purple and blue robes randomly mixed in between. After slightly shaking her head, Shang Wuxin fished out a black robe and went to the inner bathroom to wash up. There were only a few robes similar to the black brocade robe within her wardrobe. Moreover, it looked like the original owner hadn't ever worn it, or else Shang Wuxin wouldn't have put it on. Throwing off the tattered yellow robes and slipping out of her undergarments, Shang Wuxin assessed her newly attained body. She was normally apathetic, yet even she had to sigh in admiration. This body's skin was smooth and soft. Previously she had seen many beauties, but compared to this body's fair and beautiful skin, they weren't even worth mentioning. She couldn't even see the pores. If the former Shang Wuxin had lived her life as a woman, perhaps she would have turned out as an enchantress who was able to bring countries to their downfalls. What a pity that such a calamitous beauty never got a happy ending. After cleaning then drying herself, Shang Wuxin walked over to the mirror besides the bath, wishing to take a look at her own appearance. She was shocked speechless. Her face was downright gorgeous. Right, only this kind of face deserved to be attached to such a flawless body. Even if she didn't care about looks, she had to say, this body was a true evildoer, simply too stunning. What Shang Wuxin didn't know was that while the former owner had this beauty, she was unfortunately very cowardly and bland, so people easily overlooked her. But now that the residing soul had changed, the beauty could now be displayed to its full extent. The soul and the body were compatible, making her shine so brightly it was difficult to look straight at her. Though Shang Wuxin was stunned after having seen her own face, she didn't dwell on it. She looked at her somewhat flat chest. Maybe because the former Shang Wuxin daily wrapped her chest with a white cloth, the 15-year-old, that should have had a more shapely figure, was rather lamentable. Her chest only had 2 small steamed buns. Shang Wuxin picked up a white cloth and proceeded to bind herself with it, but she also firmly decided to pay more attention to her body in the future, lest she really evolved into some neither male nor female person. When the bedroom door got opened from the inside, the maids and the young servant boys standing outside all looked on in fear. Then they saw the crown prince dressed in a black brocade robe, his presence like a ferocious beast. They'd never known the crown prince could brandish such an imposing aura. Crown prince! The servants immediately fell down to their knees. Many of them were in a panic. The crown prince had definitely gone missing after he went to the forest behind the imperial tomb. Even His Majesty knew of this, yet His Majesty hadn't shown any interest. But how could the crown prince appear from inside his bedroom now? Because they'd believed he was dead, many of the servants had sought to switch to the other princes. Would the crown prince find out? No, he wouldn't find out as he was too dull. Shang Wuxin stood on top of the stairs, looking at the dozen maids and servant boys kneeling on the ground. Did the previous owner really have so few people? Anyway, they were all people serving outsiders' interests. Looking at them, Shang Wuxin's eyes flashed with intent. Crown Prince! A 40 to 50-year-old palace eunuch suddenly rushed in, calling out in a shrill voice when he saw Shang Wuxin. The ear-piercing voice wasn't to her liking, but she could hear the butler's genuine concern within it. This butler had looked after the crown prince from childhood, and he was the only one within the residence who knew the crown prince was a female. Moreover, he was one of the few who dearly cherished the crown prince. The palace eunuch was called Hai Qing. He was formerly the head eunuch serving beside the crown prince's birth mother, Empress Qiu. Because of his loyalty and devotion, he had gained Empress Qiu's favor, and after her death, he was tasked with taking care of the crown prince's daily life. He looked after the crown prince like he would his own child. After the crown prince established a residence, Hai Qing followed him to serve in his household, becoming the residence's butler. Everyone called him Chief Hai. Crown Prince Eunuch Hai came to Shang Wuxin's side intending to check for injuries, but she blocked him. She didn't like others touching her, even if this palace eunuch had no evil intentions. Besides, she wasn't the former Shang Wuxin. Eunuch Hai didn't think much of the crown prince's rejection. Seeing the crown prince safe and sound, his heart finally felt at ease, but his mouth still nagged endlessly. Crown prince, don't act willfully from now on. If something happens to you, how can old me keep living When I die, how will I explain myself to the empress This royal one is fine, you also don't need to die. Shang Wuxin said to Chief Hai. Although this Chief Hai looked a little insane, it was most likely due to his service that the crown prince was able to survive for so many years. Shang Wuxin truly appreciated these kinds of loyal and capable people. Chief Hai choked on his words. The crown prince was acting different. Leaving aside his imposing manner, even his appearance was more dazzling. He always knew the crown prince was very beautiful, But the transformation was almost like a rebirth, too shocking. But regardless what the crown prince was like, he was his master. He had vowed his loyalty to him. "Where is Xiang'er?" Shang Wuxin asked while looking at the kneeling servants. Unfortunately, no one replied. Xiang'er was the crown prince's personal maid, but she always acted rampant within the residence. As far as the servants were concerned, Xiang'er was much more fearsome than the crown prince. After all, the crown prince was stuck sick in bed day in and day out. They basically had nothing to fear. They had also never seen him punish anyone. Good, excellent. Hearing the silence before her, Shang Wuxin didn't get angry, and smiled instead. Apparently, the crown prince was just a good-for-nothing waste in their eyes. Why else would they ignore her words? Shameless. Chief Hai kicked a nearby servant boy and glowered at everyone. Didn't you hear the crown prince speak? You're tired of living. Even if his voice was shrill, his status was above the other servants and his oppressive aura wasn't at all easy to deal with. Moreover, everyone within the residence was afraid of Chief Hai. His manner in front of the crown prince might have been like a dog, but behind the scenes, Chief Hai was merciless toward the people who disobeyed the crown prince. However, Xiang'er was a favored maid and the crown prince would definitely not be able to bear scolding her. The servant boy, who was kicked earlier, immediately ran out to find Xiang'er. Looking at the crown prince who was acting different from usual, Chief Hai wondered what he intended to do. Normally, Xiang'er used the crown prince's kindness to run rampant and harass others within the residence. Previously, he had wanted to deal with her in private, but that would have saddened the crown prince. Since then, he turned a blind eye when it came to Xiang'er. But why was the crown prince looking for her today? Hopefully it wasn't in order to comfort Xiang'er. The crown prince was too kind-hearted and couldn't understand that Xiang'er didn't know her place. After waiting for a long time, the servant boy brought Xiang'er back to the courtyard right outside the sleeping quarters. Looking at the crown prince standing there, Xiang'er felt shocked at heart. Was this really the crown prince? It was obviously the same face, yet why did it feel different? Previously, though the crown prince's position was noble, she still looked down on him. He was easily deceived by her time and time again. But now, though the crown prince was simply standing over there and not even looking her way, Xiang'er felt her heart shiver. Shang Wuxin looked down at Xiang'er, who was also the main culprit behind the previous owner's untimely death. Her appearance wasn't particularly pretty, but she had, to an extent, some elegance. More importantly, while the crown prince was missing, this maid who served in his residence was actually dressed up lavishly. She had placed an expensive pearl hairpin on her head and was adorned in a fine pink dress that seemed out of place. The maids in the crown prince's residence were supposed to wear clothes suitable for maids, yet she was dressed so differently. Seeing her pair of misty eyes, Shang Wuxin could tell at a glance that she had been with a man just recently. Very good, truly very good. Xiang'er, do you know what you did wrong? Shang Wuxin asked while looking at the clouds in the sky. Her voice was dignified, yet indifferent. Xiang'er straightened her waist and spoke, feigning calmness. I'm not sure what the crown prince means. I haven't done anything. I was sick with worry when I found out the crown prince had met with mishap, daily hoping for the crown prince's safe return. Sure enough, the heavens noticed my sincerity and the crown prince returned safe and sound. Xiang'er wailed, but her eyes didn't even have fake tears. It was hard to believe that the former crown prince wasn't ever able to see through her act. Slap her mouth? Shang Wuxin ordered coldly. Everyone thought they'd misheard. The crown prince was actually able to heartlessly order his favored maid to be punished. No one dared to move. The one who got his composure back first was Chief Hai. Now, he concluded that the crown prince really had changed, but this kind of change was a good thing. Now he would be able to clearly see the true faces of these crude people. Slap. Chief Hai immediately stepped forward and slapped Xiang'er in the face. He might have been a palace eunuch, but he knew martial arts. Some of the former crown prince's martial arts had been personally taught by him. Unfortunately, while the original's martial arts was outstanding, she wasn't able to utilize it. Xiang'er stuttered, pointing at Chief Hai indignantly. She had always been a little afraid of him, But because the crown prince had always protected her, Chief Hai had always left her alone. Ever since she had started serving the crown prince, she hadn't been hit by anyone. Keep slapping. Shang Wuxin was still observing the clouds in the sky, but her voice was even colder than before. Chief Hai smiled happily and directly gave Xiang'er a few more ruthless slaps, turning her carefully made-up face into an unrecognizable shape. She wouldn't even be able to speak clearly. What was more terrible, Chief Hai had knocked out several of her teeth. It could be easily inferred just how much strength he had used. At this moment, Xiang'er looked with some fear towards the crown prince, who was standing peacefully as if he hadn't heard a thing. She was afraid, but more than that, she was puzzled. Shang Wuxin's voice leisurely sounded out, "Are you wondering why this prince wanted to punish you?" Xiang'er nodded. She really didn't know why the crown prince did that. The kneeling maids and servant boys were also bewildered. His behavior scared them. Now, they had finally realized that the crown prince was truly not the same. A lowly servant dares to call herself I to this prince's face, not even saluting when you saw this prince. This prince has barely started questioning you, and you spoke out without permission. You tell me, should you, or should you not get slapped? Shang Wuxin's voice was pleasant, neither angry nor happy. It seemed that in his eyes, Xiang'er wasn't worthy of his emotions. Xiang'er definitely didn't expect this explanation. She had stayed by the crown prince's side for several years already. Starting out secretly and ending up openly rampant, she'd gradually forgotten her own servant's identity. But the crown prince had been indulging her first, so why did he treat her like this in the end? Xiang'er, do you know what you did wrong? Shang Wuxin lowered her head to look at the kneeling Xiang'er with a disinterested expression. Xiang'er was speechless, but she nodded desperately. She now knew that the crown prince shouldn't be provoked, so she didn't dare irritate him. How obedient! Shang Wuxin chuckled. That smile made her peerless face even more dazzling, causing the maids, who were peeking secretly, to blush. The crown prince was too beautiful. Since you already know what you did wrong, you will accept the punishment. You come over here. Shang Wuxin pointed at one of the kneeling maids. That maid was wearing a very common servant dress. She had a long scar on her face, but her expression was composed. More importantly, the maid resembled her former subordinate Wu Wei very much. Even her dignified manner was similar. Though she was only an ordinary maid, Shang Wuxin was sure that under the right circumstances, she could turn into a princess-like existence. The woman walked toward Shang Wuxin, then knelt down before her. Her voice was cold, but not impolite. It seemed it was naturally like that. This servant greets the crown prince. Shang Wuxin looked at her with satisfaction, then stated, "You'll be called Wu Wei from now on. You'll attend to this prince. Are you willing?" The woman looked up in disbelief, but she found the crown prince's eyes were bright and clear. He had a commanding presence resembling a phoenix, compelling people to revere him. His eyes didn't hold any contempt toward her appearance, but a sort of respect. She felt she could spend her life following this young man. This servant is willing. Thank you, Crown Prince, for granting a name. Wu Wei respectfully kowtowed. This crown prince was a hidden dragon that would soar in the skies one day. He had granted her a name and asked for her opinion. Since she pledged her loyalty, she would no longer just be some disfigured person among the common folk. She would be the crown prince's personal maid, Wu Wei. Shang Wuxin nodded her head appreciatively, then surveyed the kneeling servants again as she said, "Each of you will slap Xiang'er. You're not allowed to stop until she stops breathing. If this prince finds out anyone is being lenient, there won't be a need for you to keep living." As soon as she was done speaking, Shang Wuxin entered her sleeping quarters, while Chief Hai looked at everyone with a smile. The crown prince had finally seen the true colors of these deceptive people. If the late empress knew about it, she would have definitely been gratified. Though Xiang'er wanted to flee, she was blocked by Chief Hai. Since he was around, no one dared to rebel. They had no other choice but to slap her face one by one, each one of them an executioner. Xiang'er finally ceased breathing. But a dreadful shadow had been cast over their hearts. "Crown Prince, are you awake?" Wu Wei asked quietly as she stood outside the bedroom. She knew that while the crown prince was resting, he absolutely could not be disturbed. In addition, over the past several days, Wu Wei had discovered one of the crown prince's secrets. He had a hard time getting out of bed in the morning. Due to the other day's display of intimidation, things were quiet in the residence. But hidden underneath the calm, it wasn't at all peaceful. Currently, there wasn't a single person within the residence who dared to belittle the crown prince. Many people actually became fearful of him. But after serving him for the past few days, Wu Wei's loyalty never wavered. If anything, she felt even more strongly that he was immeasurably profound. The crown prince's lethargic voice emerged from inside the bedroom. The voice made people unconsciously admire it. Wu Wei entered without any further ceremonies. The crown prince didn't like people serving him closely, so she would only tidy up the sleeping quarters. Oftentimes he would do it himself. It made Wu Wei feel warm at heart, especially since his position was so respectable. Shang Wuxin had already washed and dressed and was watching Wu Wei come in, looking in her eyes. It was just a simple gaze, but it made Wu Wei a bit nervous. The crown prince's eyes were too straightforward and sharp, as if they could see through anything. Wu Wei felt that she didn't want to ever displease him. "How'd it go?" Shang Wuxin asked coldly, but because of her indifferent tone it didn't sound like a question. "This servant has found many orphans, as well as soldiers with good aptitudes. I have sent them to the place that you have specified. They're using the crown prince's method to train, and the capable ones have received your martial arts manual," Wu Wei reported while kneeling on the ground. Ever since the day she became the crown prince's personal maid, he had let her handle some matters, all of which were very important. She didn't know whether the crown prince actually trusted her that much, or if he just couldn't be bothered to do them himself. However, she did her best to accomplish her tasks perfectly. Shang Wuxin wasn't disappointed. From the very first time she had laid eyes on the woman who seemed similar to her previous subordinate, she had expected her to be very capable. Just like the former Wu Wei, this one was wise and astute, but until now, she was like a pearl gathering dust. But since Shang Wuxin had taken over, she would clean up that dust and let Wu Wei shine brightly. "You know martial arts?" Though it was clearly a question, it sounded like a statement. Shang Wuxin seemed to ask at random. Wu Wei heavily knocked her head on the soft white blanket, but the sound of a bang could be heard from there nevertheless. She spoke in a bit of a panic. "This servant knows martial arts, asking the crown prince to punish." She did indeed know martial arts, and furthermore, her skill wasn't bad. Since the crown prince hadn't asked, she hadn't told him. Because the crown prince was usually so aloof, she felt that if she said it first, she would only end up bothering him. But now that he asked, it seemed as if she had been withholding the truth. She wasn't afraid of getting punished, but she didn't want to have to part from him. He was the master she had sworn her loyalty to. "Get up," Shang Wuxin said quietly. She wasn't blaming Wu Wei. For her, it was a good thing that Wu Wei had experience in the martial arts. After all, she was her closest subordinate. If she were too weak, she wouldn't be able to survive for long. Wu Wei stood up, not daring to meet the crown prince's eyes. A large bump had already swelled up on her forehead. Combined with the scar on her cheek, she looked even fiercer, but she was standing there like a child who had done something wrong. Looking at her, Shang Wuxin found the sight rather comical. "Catch." Shang Wuxin threw her a rare martial arts manual she had personally written down. She was the former master of the Shang family, which had kept numerous rare books on martial arts handed down through the ages. It could be said that her mind was currently filled with rare martial arts that didn't even exist in this particular world. She also knew that Wu Wei hadn't peeked into the manual she had given her a few days ago, and had faithfully delivered it to the recruited servants. She was certain that Wu Wei could be trusted. Wu Wei caught the book at once, respectfully holding it with both hands. The scent of ink was still present on the book. She saw the bold handwriting inside. It was a masterful, flashy handwriting, yet the crown prince himself was as tranquil as water. No, perhaps even water wasn't as tranquil as the crown prince. Crown Prince, Wu Wei was awestruck when she looked inside the martial arts manual. Even at a glance she could tell it was extremely powerful and valuable. Why would the crown prince give such a book to her? Find the time to properly practice, you're too weak. Shang Wuxin stated the facts. Estimating that the manual might be too difficult for Wu Wei, she added, if you can't understand anything, go and ask Chief Hai. This prince hopes to see some changes in you within 3 months. Yes. Wu Wei nodded, then went about tidying up the crown prince's bedroom without a word while Shang Wuxin was sitting by the window and staring at the clouds in the sky. Wu Wei had noticed that the crown prince was normally quiet. So quiet it was scary. Sometimes he didn't even resemble a living person. Finished cleaning, Wu Wei lingered around wordlessly. She was well aware she had to leave to practice her martial arts as soon as possible, but looking at the crown prince sitting there by himself, she didn't know why she couldn't bear to take a single step. Even if she was just a servant, she still wished to keep him company. Her master was just too desolate. Crown Prince. Chief Hai's voice reached them from outside. Shang Wuxin focused her eyes. Wu Wei knew what she had to do, saying towards the closed door, the crown prince is awake. Chief Hai, please enter. Though she hadn't served the crown prince for long, she was very perceptive. During the past few days, she got to understand his disposition. She took care of the trivial tasks. Even though she was intelligent, she wasn't pretentious. Chief Hai entered the bedroom wearing his usual gray robe. For decades, he hadn't once changed to a different style. No one except for Chief Hai had been allowed to enter the crown prince's bedroom before. There were even spies sent by some factions to search the crown prince's sleeping quarters, but they hadn't been able to find out anything useful. If they had to say anything, it would be that the crown prince's bedroom was somewhat nondescript. Over time, people lost their curiosity. Recently, one maid named Wu Wei had been allowed to enter his sleeping quarters, so everyone in the residence was fawning over her trying to gain her favor. But Wu Wei was unresponsive. She only waited upon the crown prince and took care of the tasks she was given. As he entered, Chief Hai noticed the crown prince sitting by the window. If he wasn't uncommonly familiar with the crown prince, he would have thought that was a different person entirely. He didn't know what happened to him in the mountain forest that day, but he was certain it had been something major, enough to make the crown prince change completely. But to him, that kind of change was a very good thing. What is it? Shang Wuxin asked impatiently. Chief Hai organized his thoughts. The crown prince was no longer that little girl who would run and hide in her bedroom to cry, nor was she the little kid who used to complain to him. The current crown prince was already a proper prince. What Chief Hai had to do was to simply take care of the crown prince's residence well. Crown Prince, the emperor has summoned you, Chief Hai said with a lowered head. He still felt somewhat anxious. Since the empress' death, the emperor never showed an interest in the crown prince and even treated him with repugnance. Though it was a crown prince position, it didn't hold any power. Previously, the crown prince had always gotten hurt because of the emperor's attitude. Would the current crown prince still get hurt as before? Shang Wuxin glanced at Chief Hai as if she hadn't heard anything, but they were certain of the contrary. Sometime later, she got up. Wu Wei, accompany this prince to the palace. She had already speculated about that so-called father emperor. In her memories, the father emperor could be considered thoroughly heartless and disgusted with the crown prince, often reprimanding him in front of the other princes. Yet Shang Wuxin felt like things weren't so simple. She had wanted to go and take a look at him for a while now. If the emperor wasn't a threat, she would ignore him. If he intended to block her way, she wouldn't mind becoming a rebel to commit regicide. Not saying a word, Wu Wei slightly brought her hair down to cover up the large bump on her forehead. She didn't want people to think that the crown prince mistreated his servants. Crown Prince. Chief Hai looked with some hesitation at the crown prince, who was preparing to depart. Shang Wuxin paused her steps and glanced back at him. Because she was aware of his loyalty and concern, she was more patient towards him. Wu Wei is but a servant girl. Letting her enter the palace, if His Majesty saw, he might get offended. Crown Prince, please reconsider. Chief Hai worriedly proclaimed. Nowadays the crown prince had both courage and smarts. If the emperor decided to suppress him, the crown prince's residence wouldn't see any good days ahead. It's fine. Shang Wuxin considered this one sentence enough of a reassurance for Chief Hai. Then she led Wu Wei out of the residence and onto the carriage that would take them to the palace. Chief Hai kept standing at the gate, his heart full of worry. But he still fully believed in the crown prince. Shang Wuxin stepped down the carriage before sizing up the imperial palace that everyone seemed to admire. It certainly was a magnificent building. It looked as though it could rise above the clouds. The stone bricks gave it an ancient feel while a row of imperial guards were stationed in the front. Court eunuchs and palace maids lined up with lowered heads. At first glance, Shang Wuxin disliked it because there was no freedom in the palace. Unfortunately, that was where authority lay. All the guards seemed unwilling to salute Shang Wuxin. When Wu Wei saw their half-hearted attitude, anger flashed through her eyes, but she knew that if the crown prince didn't say anything, it meant he didn't care about it. Furthermore, they were in the imperial palace right now. Her conduct would reflect on the crown prince, so she didn't dare be impulsive and cause him trouble. Shang Wuxin didn't think much of these people's obvious disdain. She would probably kill them if they were at the crown prince's residence, but they weren't. Though she was overbearing, she didn't need absolutely everyone to revere her. It would be enough if they just didn't inconvenience her. But just as Shang Wuxin was about to enter the royal study, the guards outside blocked Wu Wei. Random servants aren't allowed in the royal study. The guards took out their swords. Servants aside, even the ministers weren't allowed to enter the royal study, let alone a low-born maid with an ugly appearance. Wu Wei was rooted to her spot, since if she so much as moved an inch, those drawn swords would immediately stab into her. Moreover, she wasn't sure whether these people would dare to hurt the crown prince. These days, she hadn't witnessed him practicing, but she believed he knew martial arts. After all, he had so many rare manuals on techniques. But she wasn't aware of just how skilled he was. Even if she had to die here today, as long as the crown prince didn't give an order, she wouldn't do anything. You dare block this prince's subordinate? A freezing aura surged out of Shang Wuxin's body, her expression colder than the Arctic lands. The frosty fury within her black eyes made the guards surrounding them shiver all over. Even Wu Wei was a little shocked by the crown prince's oppressive atmosphere. Such a crown prince naturally made people have the urge to submit and serve. The imperial guards looked at the crown prince with some fear. Compared to His Majesty, the crown prince's imposing manner didn't lose out. Both were ice cold. But they, the guards, still had to do their duty. How could they let an unimportant maid enter the royal study? Later, even if His Majesty didn't reprimand the crown prince, he would still take their heads. Wu Wei. Shang Wuxin turned to Wu Wei, who was only standing there motionless and looking at her. Shang Wuxin's eyes flashed with satisfaction. The maid was stupidly loyal, but she really liked that. Seeing the vague smile in the crown prince's eyes, Wu Wei's heart quivered. She abruptly attacked the guards who had their swords pointed at her. Her skill in martial arts wasn't particularly good. In any case, she couldn't be compared to those imperial guards. However, she really deserved to be called Wu Wei. Even if she got injured, she wouldn't let the enemies have it easy. In just a short while, many wounds and cuts appeared on Wu Wei's body, but the guards didn't fare much better. The more fearsome enemies weren't the ones with high martial arts, but the ones who weren't afraid to die. The guards took note of that seemingly delicate servant girl. Wu Wei had sustained so many injuries, she looked close to dying, yet the crown prince's face showed no expression. He was merely standing to the side, not even glancing at her. That kind of conduct really forced people to re-evaluate the so-called incompetent crown prince. Was such a heartless crown prince really so incompetent? Why is it so noisy outside? A middle-aged man, who was wearing the bright yellow emperor's robe, suddenly walked out of the royal study. The guards sank to their knees, loudly shouting, "Your Majesty!" Shang Wuxin's eyes showed a hint of delight. It really was somewhat strenuous to draw him out. She openly looked at the emperor, who was also her father. He looked dazzling in the dragon robe and with his long black hair let down. One couldn't tell that he was in his 40s, he appeared more like a man in his 30s. The sun had turned his skin into a glowing bronze color. Shang Wuxin was confident that Emperor Xing knew martial arts, and that even after ascending the throne, he had never abandoned practicing. His thick brows were as if drawn with a brush, giving the impression of unswerving determination. Under the strict upturned eyebrows were a pair of sharp, tiger-like eyes which contained wildness, dominance, and a trace of carefully concealed gentleness. At this moment, Shang Wuxin finally understood why her body was so gorgeous. She had heard that Empress Qiu used to be the #1 beauty under heaven, and while Emperor Sheng was in his 40s, his handsome looks hadn't been diminished one bit. The two of them were so outstanding, it wasn't strange that Shang Wuxin had grown up beautiful as well. Emperor Shang looked at Shang Wuxin. His keen eyes observed her with his usual indifference, without showing the slightest reaction. His gaze wasn't out of the ordinary, yet it got everyone within the vicinity scared stiff, because his eyes were just too piercing. Out of everyone outside the study, only the Crown Prince Shang Wuxin and her maid Wu Wei weren't kneeling. Shang Wuxin didn't believe anyone deserved her kneeling down for them. Wu Wei just didn't think it necessary to kneel down to anyone besides the Crown Prince, even if that person was the Crown Prince's father, the Emperor. Emperor Shang looked at Shang Wuxin for a long time. The legs of the kneeling guards had already gotten numb, the court eunuchs were already drenched in cold sweat, and Wu Wei was vigilantly eyeing everyone. Yet both the Emperor and Shang Wuxin never wavered. Emperor Shang finally looked away and said to her, "Come in." He didn't reprimand Shang Wuxin for being rude and causing offense, but he also didn't speak any loving words. No one could make any sense of it. Was the Emperor fond of the Crown Prince, or was he disgusted with him as usual? Shang Wuxin threw Wu Wei a glance, then entered the royal study. The doors slowly closed, conveniently obstructing everyone's view. The royal study was filled with things that couldn't be found anywhere else, but the most valuable ones were still the dragon desk and dragon chair. They gave the room an awe-inspiring feel. Emperor Shang directly sat on the dragon chair, while his personal attendant, court eunuch Su, moved to his side, ready to serve. Shang Wuxin took the first seat without saluting, nor showing a shred of respect. That kind of attitude was too rampant, but it was supposed to be like that in the first place. Eunuch Su glanced surprised at the Crown Prince, who was behaving so strangely, he could be mistaken for a different person. He was even more shocked by the Emperor's lack of reaction, but he was merely the Emperor's servant, thus he lowered his head, afraid of seeing or hearing anything he shouldn't. Though he stood there for a very long time, he truly didn't hear a single sound. The Emperor should have already been berating the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince should have been arguing back. Then the father and son would part on bad terms, and within 2 days, the whole palace would know that the Crown Prince had angered the Emperor again. Yet something seemed different now. Shang Wuxin was looking at the Emperor, who was looking at her. There was a hint of warmth in his deep gaze, though it was hidden so well, even the Emperor himself hadn't realized it was there. "Not saluting upon meeting us, who gave you the courage?" Emperor Shang opened his mouth first, but as soon as he started talking, it was to scold. Though unfortunately, Shang Wuxin wasn't like the former Crown Prince, who could only look at the Emperor dejectedly. Furthermore, she didn't bother giving an explanation. After observing Emperor Shang, she had noticed that he was actually restless with worry. Shang Wuxin looked at the seemingly angry Emperor Shang, then stood up without a warning, startling him and Eunuch Su. Eunuch Su went so far as to move in front of the Emperor, blocking him from whatever harmful thing that unfathomable Crown Prince was about to do. On the other hand, Emperor Shang remained the same. However, Shang Wuxin simply left the royal study without giving them so much as a glance. The purpose she came here today had already been reached. Even though some matters were still unclear, she got the basics. As for her imperial father, she smiled wordlessly. "Crown Prince." Seeing the Crown Prince walking out of the study safe and sound, Wu Wei's mind calmed down. If the Emperor had decided to punish him, she wouldn't have been able to help. Instead, had she rushed in, she would have become a burden to him. With these thoughts, Wu Wei resolved to improve her martial arts as quickly as possible and become his support. Shang Wuxin glanced at Wu Wei and found that she hadn't been further harassed by the guards. Without pausing her steps, she kept walking away from the royal study. As for the numerous imperial guards, none of them were brave enough to irritate her. The crown prince dared to bring a maid to a meeting with the emperor without any explanation. He didn't even bother saluting, yet he wasn't punished. Moreover, his personal maid was so difficult to deal with. Many people suspected that the former crown prince had been concealing his strength and biding his time. From this day on, many people in the palace started dreading the crown prince, whom they had previously looked down on the most. Eunuch Su-ah, you tell me, did I do something wrong? Emperor Shang was staring at the shut golden door, feeling anxious for a short moment, but he could only speak his thoughts to his attendant. As soon as he stepped out of this study, he could not say anything, and could not show anything on his face. How could your majesty be wrong? Eunuch Su earnestly replied. He knew the reason for many of his majesty's actions. Emperor Shang smiled. Even if he made a mistake, no one would dare say anything. Never mind. Thinking of the crown prince's behavior just now, he suddenly came to a decision. Meanwhile, Shang Wuxin brought Wu Wei out of the imperial palace and sat on the carriage, ready to return to the crown prince's residence. Right then, their carriage got obstructed by some people. Wu Wei, who was in the driver's seat, looked icily at the lot blocking the path, but the one leading them was the eldest prince, Shang Chenjiao. Wu Wei lowered her head as she couldn't let her discontent show, but she was unaware that her state of mind had already been perceived by Shang Wuxin. What is it? Shang Wuxin lifted the curtain slightly and asked the eldest prince Shang Chenjiao. Her manner was graceful even while sitting in a not at all luxurious carriage. In fact, because of her radiance, the ordinary carriage also seemed to become more noble. A few carriages were parked in front of the crown prince residence's vehicle, but the very first one belonged to the eldest prince. His carriage was lavishly decorated with rare pearls hanging off it all over. He also had several bodyguards by his side. If one compared his display with the crown prince's, they would believe he was the crown prince instead. The real crown prince seemed inferior and unpresentable next to him. At this moment, the common folk had gathered in the streets to watch the show, while keeping their distance. Everyone knew that Shang's crown prince was sickly, timid, and incompetent, but no one had ever seen his face as the former crown prince had almost never set foot outside his home. Looking at the eldest prince provoking the crown prince now, many people were waiting to witness the crown prince losing face. Pride filled Shang Chenjiao's mind as he stood outside his carriage, looking arrogantly at Shang Wuxin. So what if he was the crown prince? Their royal father didn't like him, and he didn't have a mother to support him from the back. He was practically unable to keep the crown prince's position for long. Thinking of this, Shang Chenjiao's expression appeared even more fearless as he sneered at Shang Wuxin. Regarding Shang Chenjiao's expression, Shang Wuxin didn't have any emotional reaction whatsoever. Shang Chenjiao was wearing a very showy purple robe. Unfortunately, the purple color didn't bring out his nobleness, but instead made him look like an upstart. His countenance was relatively stalwart, but his under-eye shadows were too heavy and his eyes couldn't conceal a thing. Shang Wuxin felt it was a waste of time to even look at this person. She put down the curtain. Shang Chenjiao was the type who wouldn't amount to anything, just an inconsequential person. He wasn't worth her attention, but if he didn't know his place, she wouldn't mind carving him up. She was only afraid that the taste of killing her elder brother would be too good. Noticing that the crown prince had put down the curtain, Wu Wei understood his meaning. She directly grasped the harness, preparing to drive the carriage around the blockade. However, her attitude made Shang Chenjiao's anger rise. Whenever he'd met the crown prince before, he had been so submissive, yet he was unexpectedly ignoring him now. Even his ugly maid dared to behave like that. Could it be because he hadn't taught his younger imperial brother a lesson recently? Since the crown prince is inside, why not come out to meet this elder imperial brother? Shang Chenjiao wanted to directly grab that sickly crown prince and throw him down the carriage, but seeing his bodyguard's expressions, he knew he couldn't do that in public with so many onlookers around. Still, he was very used to mocking him. Or is the crown prince so timid that he'll tremble in fear even just coming out of the carriage? Ha ha ha! The official's sons and the bodyguards behind Shang Chenjiao all roared out in laughter. Someone threw in, "Who knows, Maybe the crown prince pissed his pants in fear. Who doesn't know the crown prince is as timid as a mouse? The common folk were watching as the eldest prince humiliated the crown prince. Even the imperial guards dared to join in, since they knew what kind of reputation he carried. It made for a lively show. Wu Wei gripped her fists, wishing nothing more than to murder these people who were ridiculing the crown prince, but she was unable to deal with so many at once. Granted that she managed to beat up the eldest prince, she wouldn't have a nice ending. She wasn't afraid of bearing the consequences, she rather feared of implicating the crown prince. Since it happened at the imperial palace, Wu Wei understood that it was difficult for the crown prince to make a move. Since you're aware that this prince is the crown prince, how come none of you followed basic courtesy? Or did imperial consort Qin teach the eldest prince this way? A cool voice with a sharp tone sounded from inside the carriage. It was deep and melodious. Just the sound of it intimidated the laughing people into a halt and made the common folk curiously gaze at the crown prince's carriage. Having such a voice, just how charming would his appearance be? Perhaps the rumors were wrong. You want this prince to salute you? Shang Chenjiao asked incredulous. It had always been his younger imperial brother saluting him whenever they met each other. Now he dared make him salute. Had he gone insane? Who do you think you are, actually asking me to salute you? Shang Chenjiao had barely finished saying those words when he heard a collective gasp from around him. No matter how powerless the crown prince was, how could a mere prince speak that way to him? Such words were going against the law. Even the common people were looking at the eldest prince with uncertainty. He unfathomable crown prince, he. A beautiful and unrestrained laughter erupted from inside the carriage. When it finally ended, that same voice went on to say, Minister Bai, you're in charge of the country's etiquette. What do you think of this? Minister Bai? Shock went through everyone. Minister Bai was deeply respected by the emperor. Moreover, he was an honest official who never participated in struggles for power. Most importantly, he had been in charge of the country's etiquette for a long time now. All the princes and princesses weren't taught etiquette by a grand tutor, but precisely by him, Minister Bai. At that moment, everyone noticed a mature man rising from his seat in a small and crude tea stand by the side of the street. Although he wore an ordinary gray jacket, it couldn't hide his vigor and grace. He was more than 50 but still full of life. Even his hair didn't have a trace of gray. Minister Bai dutifully approached the crown prince's carriage and performed the standard courtesy ritual. This official greets the crown prince. Seeing that venerated official making his salutations so respectfully, everyone quickly knelt down, their voices also turning more deferential, greeting the crown prince. Even though so many people were kneeling outside, including one court official, the crown prince inside the carriage still didn't come out, disappointing the ones who wished to see his charming appearance. Rise? The clear voice brought a feeling of oppression. Minister Bai saw the tightly closed carriage as he got up. He had also previously met the crown prince, but the crown prince had always had a timid character. But that didn't seem to be the case now. Would someone timid have such an overbearing presence? Someone timid would have immediately come out of the carriage to greet him. Apparently, the crown prince was a profound character who hid his abilities. Their country was in for some stormy changes. As the only one who hadn't saluted, the eldest prince stood out a lot. But standing out this way made him feel rather anxious, especially since Minister Bai was looking at him with eyes full of disapproval. Even if he was a prince, he still held some apprehension towards that minister. His mother had repeatedly urged him to curry favor with Minister Bai, but now, Minister Bai is an experienced official who has worked for 2 dynasties. Imperial father has praised Minister Bai as the paragon of etiquette in this country. This prince as well as the other imperial brothers and sisters have been lucky enough to receive guidance from you. I wonder what Minister Bai thinks of today's display? The crown prince's voice was tranquil, without anger or discontent, yet it chilled people to the bones. Shang Chenjiao really wished to further ridicule and sneer at the crown prince, but he found Minister Bai looking at him with a dissatisfied expression. Then the minister's voice resounded in the bustling street. This official has shamed both the emperor and your highness. Though the eldest prince is the oldest among the princes, he still doesn't know propriety. This official will report to his majesty and make sure to correct this wrong behavior. Shang Chunzhao panicked a little. If imperial father learned of his actions today, it would be highly unlikely he would ever be placed in an important position. Moreover, who knew how those other princes breathing down his neck would stab him in the back? Minister Bai. Shang Chunzhao rushed into the conversation with a smile on his face. This prince was merely jesting with imperial younger brother. Imperial younger brother is too narrow-minded. How can you be a country's crown prince this way? Good. Very good. Even at the present situation, Shang Chunzhao still found a way to throw in a word against her. But was he aware that those type of words would make Minister Bai even more dissatisfied with him? Even the numerous commoners starting looking down on the eldest prince. On the other hand, they felt that the crown prince, who hadn't shown himself once, had an excellent upbringing. Jesting? The voice from inside the carriage seemed to hold back laughter. Imperial elder brother is so fond of jesting, but I wonder whether you'll still enjoy joking around when you meet imperial father next time. Or perhaps you've never been concerned with this prince, nor with imperial father. That scornful voice almost made Shang Chunzhao lose his balance. But before he could open his mouth to justify himself, the voice from the carriage went on to say, Minister Bai, this prince will leave first. Seeing off the crown prince, Minister Bai bent his waist slightly. He could tell that the crown prince was making use of him just now. But even so, it was more important to note his overwhelming aura. Even his majesty couldn't compare. Not to mention, the crown prince was only in his teens. Sure enough, he wouldn't turn out useless, given his origins. The guards were about to move the eldest prince's carriage out of the way, but instead they saw Wu Wei driving straight through. With a loud crash, the eldest prince's carriage got knocked over. Even the horses scattered away, leaving behind a carriage laying damaged on the ground, as if to mock the eldest prince. Shang Chunzhao would much rather curse up a storm to make his bodyguards drag the crown prince off the carriage, but recalling that Minister Bai was standing beside him, he had to swallow down his resentment. As for the commoners, when they saw the crown prince's maid unexpectedly exhibit such courage, they cheered even louder. And starting today, everyone would know that the crown prince wasn't the same pushover as before. The gathered crowd even started thinking that the previous reputation of the crown prince was most likely spread around by the eldest prince's cronies. Shang Wuxin herself didn't anticipate that without doing anything much, she would end up reversing the commoners' opinion of the crown prince. At that moment, a man who was sitting in a private room of a two-story restaurant glanced at the crown prince's departing carriage. Amusement flashed through his expression. The crown prince could really be an interesting person. However, when he took a look, he saw that the window's curtain was up and a pair of bright, lustrous eyes were looking back at him. The distance was too far for him to make out their expression, but those two eyes were too intense. It was the first time he found himself in daze just from looking at someone. The opposite party simply took a glance at his eyes, then quickly put down the curtain. He didn't know why he felt somewhat disappointed, but he just had to admire the crown prince's vigilance for catching him while he was sizing him up. Inside the carriage, Shang Wuxin's eyes were bursting with rage and deep loathing right then, because she saw that the man who was just appraising her had a pair of extremely beautiful peach blossom eyes. Hee, peach blossom eyes, huh? Eunuch Hai's concern inside the crown prince's study, Shang Wuxin was leaning back on her chair, while Chief Hai knelt below. He didn't know why he was suddenly summoned. The crown prince hadn't uttered a word since he'd come in and he couldn't begin to guess the prince's thoughts these days. However, whenever he saw his lonesome figure, Chief Hai found the sight even more heartrending than the constant weeping of his previous self. Get up. Shang Wuxin opened her eyes and pointed at a chair as she said, sit. This servant, Chief Hai meant to decline. He was a mere court eunuch. What qualifications did he have to sit just like his master? His master was still so kind-hearted. Thinking so, Chief Hai's eyes got a little moist. Even if the crown prince was fearsome, a demon able to kill without a blink, Chief Hai would keep seeing him as a compassionate person. Sit. Shang Wuxin insisted lazily. She had been practicing without a break for the last few days. She had not only integrated the original body's martial arts as her own, but even added her previous life's most despotic techniques of the Shang clan into the mix. Her current ability could be considered outstanding. Though not the best, it could rival most. But what made Shang Wuxin slightly helpless was the original's poison body, which presented a very difficult problem. Moreover, she had been poisoned from birth, while in her mother's womb. Her imperial mother Qiu had also perished because of that poison. Shang Wuxin was well aware she had to detoxify, but fortunately, the poison was slow-acting, so she didn't need to worry excessively. Furthermore, her martial arts had already managed to suppress it. Though it was harmful to her body and it would be dangerous when the toxin flared up, Shang Wuxin was indifferent. Eunuch Hai sat down nervously, but his eyes were full of joy. His expression was exactly like a father looking at his own child. Towards him, Shang Wuxin was also a lot more patient and indulgent. From a certain aspect, it could be said that Eunuch Hai was blindly loyal, and she needed those types of blindly loyal people by her side. Eunuch Hai, as my personal servant, this prince has a question for you. Are you hiding anything from me? Shang Wuxin peered at his pair of eyes, that were obscured by fat and showing through a small gap. Her expression was indiscernible. Eunuch Hai slid down from the chair and knelt on the ground, his voice strained. Crown Prince, anything this servant does is for your sake. This servant will never do anything to harm you. He knew the current crown prince was extremely astute, but he didn't expect it to be to that extent. But was that sort of shrewdness good or bad? Eunuch Hai worried at heart. Speak. Shang Wuxin didn't have any emotional reaction to Chief Hai's words. Being loyal was fine, but moving around without her knowledge was as good as betrayal. She didn't need people making decisions for her. While she was alive, the Empress had a group of extremely loyal attendants. After her death, this servant immediately gathered them in secret and trained them for a very long time, thinking they could provide protection in the future, in case you encounter a mishap and need to escape. Eunuch Hai reported as he wept. Shang Wuxin felt somewhat gratified in place of her predecessor. In those kinds of circumstances, there had actually been someone willing make plans for her so many years ago. She couldn't help feeling happy. Switch all the manservants and guards in the residence with our own people. Since you've raised them for so many years and also trained them, it's time to put them to work. Shang Wuxin's lips curled with a touch of laughter. She didn't need to worry about those people's loyalty, because they were originally favored by her imperial mother and were later guided in practice by Eunuch Hai for so long. The extent of their loyalty didn't warrant any doubts. And she just happened to be in need of staff now. Although her own people had already received a decent training, it was still quite far from her standard. Eunuch Hai had simply resolved that issue. Crown Prince. Eunuch Hai looked at her in disbelief. After finding back his voice, he asked, Is the Crown Prince thinking of participating in the struggle for the throne? Shang Wuxin nodded, as if she didn't feel a speck of pressure when it came to that matter. Eunuch Hai, you may know it's often not the case that you can survive by not fighting. Instead, it's by fighting and winning that you can live unobstructed. Do you still not understand this after so long? Shang Wuxin sighed with regret. Yes, the Crown Prince has suffered unfair treatment for too long. Moreover, you're the Emperor's successor, it's only right to vie for the throne. Eunuch Hai was convinced by her words, entirely overlooking the fact that the Crown Prince wasn't actually male. But even if he was aware of it, he wouldn't think there was anything wrong with it. His family's Crown Prince was the best and he would be the future ruler of Shang. Go ahead and drive all the spies in the residence out. If any of them refuse to leave, just kill them. Shang Wuxin waved her hand as she spoke. She had never been a soft-hearted person. Life had become a cheap thing to her, and she often wasn't sure herself whether she feared death or not. Eunuch Hai nodded and went out. One shouldn't be deceived by his Maitreya Buddha-like appearance, as he wasn't someone with a gentle heart, nor easy to deal with. Crown Prince. Wu Wei entered the room. Respect rose in her when she saw the Crown Prince who resembled a celestial being. After practicing the martial arts from his rare book, her ability had improved tremendously. It was all thanks to him. Wu Wei looked at the silent crown prince who had his eyes closed. She retreated to the side and waited for 4 hours until he opened his eyes. But once he did, Wu Wei realized that he hadn't been sleeping. His pair of eyes were too clear. Crown Prince, the Emperor has selected 2 mentors for you. Wu Wei reported the Emperor's decree from today. Because Shang Wuxin had been weak and cowardly from childhood, she hadn't attended classes together with the other princes and princesses. She knew how to write only because Eunuch Hai had taught her, so in a sense, the Crown Prince did have a mentor. But all previous dynasties' crown princes needed to have 2 respectable tutors by their side. She hadn't expected the Emperor to actually find 2 mentors for her. That sort of attention could make others speculate about the Emperor's intentions. Oh, poor they. Shang Wuxin asked carelessly. One of them is the country's first son, Huan Moche. He is the only young master of the left minister's house. He is admired by many, and he's a master of both the pen and the sword. But despite the Emperor's several attempts, he refuses to enter the imperial court. Even when some of the princes and princesses wanted to make him their mentor, he declined them all. This person is really aloof. But when the Emperor wanted to select a tutor for you, that young master unexpectedly offered his services on his own. Crown Prince, I'm afraid there might be a hidden motive. Wu Wei voiced her suspicions. That kind of man was very proud. Why would he suddenly want to become the Crown Prince's tutor? It was impossible not to be doubtful. It doesn't matter. The Crown Prince's residence welcomes guests with hospitality. Shang Wuxin stated as she played with a jade ornament in her hands. Regardless of who came into the residence or what their goal was, she wasn't worried. She was more worried when they didn't do anything. The other tutor is the young general who recently returned from the border, Lin Yufeng. Although he's only 24, he's already a general. The soldiers stationed at the border have the highest respect for him. His military glory is illustrious in each of the countries where he has gone to campaigns in previous years. This person can prove to be very useful to the Crown Prince, but he's like a wild stallion that's not easy to tame. I'm afraid he would be difficult to control. Wu Wei arrived at the Crown Prince's side and prepared some tea. Shang Wuxin smiled, then glanced at Wu Wei and said, "Not bad. Your recent progress is rather quick." When she had just started work, Wu Wei was overly cautious. But now, not only was her martial arts excellent, she handled her tasks with precision. If she was a man, she would have absolutely been able to set up a business and start a career. "Thank you, Crown Prince." Wu Wei rejoiced. Due to the Crown Prince's praise, she felt that her great effort these days was worth it. If it wasn't for him often giving her advice as well as putting trust in her, it was improbable that she would grow so much. The Crown Prince was her benefactor. Accompany me to take a look at the people that Chief Hai has trained." Saying so, Shang Wuxin got up and left the study. Subordinates clad in black stood inside the expansive rear court of the Crown Prince's residence. The area that the residence covered was vast, but among all the places, the rear court was furthest away. It was left neglected with no one to manage it, and no one came around. Thus Chief Hai gathered everyone there. Shang Wuxin was wearing a black brocade robe. Her steps were graceful and unhurried as her whole body exuded a magnificent noble aura. Her face was like ice that was unable to melt. Meeting her face to face, those originally loyal subordinates felt their hearts shake in excitement. Their master was indeed out of the ordinary. Greeting the Crown Prince, Eunuch Hai, as well as everyone else, simultaneously knelt down. Their tone was respectful and reverent. Shang Wuxin was pleased with their display. Although she knew that Eunuch Hai had trained many people, she hadn't expected that many. In addition, each person's martial arts was pretty good, while their bearing was steady. In order to train troops up to that standard, it would require enormous effort and high ability. Chief Hai's importance rose even further in Shang Wuxin's eyes. "Stand up." Shang Wuxin waved her hand, then carefully sized everyone up. She slowly walked by each and every one of them, frequently releasing her bloodthirst whenever she passed by a subordinate, and causing them to drip with cold sweat. They only relaxed when Shang Wuxin left their side. This prince is standing here today to demand your absolute loyalty. Do you understand what absolute loyalty means? Your whole life will belong to me, your religion will be me. Shang Wuxin's voice was low and magnetic, without losing its cold dignity and authority. However, this prince is not someone who forces people. I'm aware that you're Imperial Mother's people and are subordinates trained by Chief Hai. I'm here to give you a choice. If any of you wants to leave, I'll give you your freedom, as well as some money to start afresh. But if you don't leave today, you'll henceforth swear your loyalty to this prince. Chief Hai opened his mouth wanting to say something. How could the Crown Prince possibly let those people go free? As the Crown Prince's servants, how could they kick their benefactor in the teeth? But seeing the Crown Prince's regal posture, he was unable to utter any dissuading words. However, a moment later, the entire rear court resounded with resolute voices. This subordinate wishes to swear loyalty to the Crown Prince. They had already been ready to pledge their life to the rumored incompetent prince because of the grace they had previously received. But meeting him today, they realized he was outstanding. That kind of master let them feel confident about swearing their loyalty. More importantly, they didn't have the slightest inclination of betrayal in front of the Crown Prince. Everyone was looking at him in high spirits. Shang Wuxin nodded with satisfaction. Would she have really given their freedom back? No, that was naturally impossible. Chief Hai had raised them for so long, they certainly knew a few of the Crown Prince residence's secrets. If there really was anyone wishing to leave, Shang Wuxin wouldn't have let him go alive. What pleased her was that those people didn't disappoint her. They were worthy of being her subordinates. Half of you will become the residence's guards. This prince hopes my residence won't be the same as a tavern anymore. This will be arranged by Chief Hai, Shang Wuxin instructed. The remaining half should follow Wu Wei to carry out training. When done, you'll return to guard the residence and let the other half go train. Though they were confused, nobody protested. Moreover, Chief Hai had complete trust in the Crown Prince, so he happily smiled with a brazen face. This old servant will make the arrangements. The Crown Prince may rest easy. The 5 people with the best martial arts, come out. Shang Wuxin ordered. Wu Wei, spar with them. Though she knew Wu Wei's skill was better, it wasn't her intention to compare them. Right now, she meant to confirm her recent progress, as well as set up a dignified image for Wu Wei as their future leader. 1 woman and 4 men dressed in black moved away from the numerous subordinates. Wu Wei nodded as a greeting, then the 6 of them promptly started their fight. Wu Wei's technique was fierce and sharp. Combined with the scar on her cheek, she appeared even more fearsome. As for the rest, their martial arts wasn't bad either, but compared to Wu Wei's, it fell short. In the end, the only ones still fighting were Wu Wei and the other female. Since they were sparring, they didn't use weapons, but both their faces were perspiring. The 2 of them did their best in the fight. While Wu Wei's skill was higher than the other woman's, she had just faced against 4 men, so she had consumed a lot of energy. It was difficult to avoid staggering. The other woman also didn't lose to Wu Wei in ferocity. Good. Shang Wuxin halted their unrelenting sparring. Though Wu Wei's martial arts hadn't met her own requirements, she ought not be too strict with her. The 2 immediately separated, but held a hint of appreciation for each other. They saluted the Crown Prince. At that moment, the subordinates were looking at him with even more reverence. His personal maid was so strong, she could deal with the strongest of their group. Thinking back on the Crown Prince's words of letting them train, many were eager to start. What is your name? Shang Wuxin looked at the black-clad woman thoughtfully. Her talent and reflexes were both quite good. In addition, Wu Wei was responsible for too many tasks. She had noticed her recent fatigue. There might be a need to arrange for 1 more personal maid. This subordinate doesn't have a name. Everyone calls me Subordinate One. The black-clad woman lowered her head to say, but her eyes didn't show any sadness. Chief Hai noticed that the Crown Prince seemed to be interested in that woman and at once stepped forward to say, this girl's parents used to serve the Empress. Not long after she was born, they passed away, thus this old servant brought her up. Because she has no parents, she hasn't received a name. This girl is very intelligent and capable. It's rare of you to praise a servant girl so much. Shang Wuxin's lips formed a small smile. From now on, you'll be called Wu Ju. You'll be my personal maid like Wu Wei. Are you willing? Wu Ju is willing. Thank you, Crown Prince. Wu Ju knelt down and saluted. She had spent her whole life on the training grounds. Since young, she knew she would have to give her loyalty to the Crown Prince. But facing him now, she felt that all her hard work was worth it. Shang Wuxin nodded and departed. They would take care of the following procedures. As the leader, she didn't need to mind every single issue personally. Her subordinates needed the opportunity to grow and develop. Han Xianhao's embarrassment darkness gradually descended as countless stars covered the night sky. Humidity infiltrated the air, creating a sentimental ambience. Shang Wuxin stood by the bedroom window, looking up at the sky that was particularly clear. The distant stars glittered like broken tears. Something suddenly disturbed the peaceful air. The guards of the Crown Prince's residence got entangled in a fight with several disguised men dressed in black. Perhaps if Shang Wuxin hadn't received those subordinates today, the black-clad people would have already slipped into the room undetected by anyone. Crown Prince! Wu Ju's worried voice sounded from outside the bedroom. Since Wu Wei had recently been responsible for training the guards, she was often busy and out of the residence. However, she was steadily handing over the chores to Wu Ju. Wu Ju was also quickly adapting to taking good care of the Crown Prince's daily life. Shang Wuxin's indifferent voice came from within the bedroom. It seemed as if she didn't feel the slightest threat regarding tonight's intrusion. Wu Ju's initially agitated mind calmed down when she heard the serene voice. Then she picked up her weapon and stood in front of the bedroom door full of vigilance, wondering when Chief Hai would come back. As long as he came back, the Crown Prince's safety would have an additional layer of insurance. Listening to and watching the outside battle, Shang Wuxin didn't show a trace of fluctuation. Although Chief Hai had educated those guards well, their training and combat experience was still lacking. Suffering a few casualties today was a good thing for them. That way they would learn to be more alert from now on, and strive even harder. They would see the frailty of life firsthand. As for those assassins, their martial arts was very good and they were well trained. Shang Wuxin felt some admiration for their organization that had managed to cultivate such outstanding killers. At that moment, sounds of a struggle between Wu Ju and someone else reached her from outside the door. Wu Ju looked at the man who had suddenly appeared there. Even if she had a cold disposition, she was still shaken by his appearance, but she composed herself quickly after. With an anxious and scared voice, she exclaimed, "Hanxing House's lord." Hanxing House was the world's #1 assassin organization. Rumors said that the people of Hanxing House killed without batting an eye, that their lord was fond of dressing in red, and that his looks were enthralling. However, those were all rumors that few had witnessed. But seeing this person now, Wu Ju was convinced he was Hanxing House's lord. Besides him, who would have the ability to break into the Crown Prince's residence so easily? Furthermore, his martial arts was so excellent, she wasn't able to parry more than a few moves. Cough! The man's hit sent Wu Ju flying, before she crashed into the sleeping quarters door. Yet Wu Ju immediately crawled up as she wanted to keep defending the entrance. But with the disparity between their strength, she was sent flying once more, and this time she remained on the ground. The man glanced at the fallen Wu Ju a little intrigued. There was actually such a loyal person attending to the famously useless Crown Prince. No, even the people guarding outside were this loyal. It seemed like he wasn't as previously rumored. There might have been some truth to what the commoners were spreading around recently. When Shang Wuxin heard Wu Ju exclaiming, "Hanxing House's lord," she raised her eyebrows. It really was a case of fate brings people together. She hadn't yet gone to find Hanxing House's Han Xianhao, but the man came to her on his own. After returning home that day, Shang Wuxin investigated a few things regarding Hanxing House. Although no one knew the name of the organization's owner, She was already certain that the man called Han Xianhao was the owner. How could such a man bend his knees to act as someone else's subordinate? "You've come?" A voice carrying a hint of a smile, yet completely humorless, reached the man's ears. He looked at the crown prince, getting a shock in the process. Beside the window stood the thin figure of a youngster dressed in black brocade clothes that were lined with gold and fastened with a jade belt. A golden coronet decorated with jewels held up his hair. His beauty was flawless, as if a craftsman had personally carved his face in jade. Even when he was standing there motionlessly, his charm and grace surpassed ordinary elegance. He gave off an impression of splendid poise. "It's you!" Han Xianhao couldn't control his surprise. He'd never expected that the young man he had been painstakingly searching for would turn out to be the country's crown prince, as well as the target he had to assassinate tonight. As he thought of that, Han Xianhao immediately sent out a signal, and the killers who were still locked in a fight within the residence promptly retreated, vanishing in the darkness of the night. Shang Wuxin observed the man who had appeared in her bedroom. Perhaps no other man would be capable of looking as beautiful in red clothes as Han Xianhao. His face was uncommonly attractive, like a work of art. His long hair was pulled back with a white hairband, the silky strands loosely draped over his shoulders and reaching his waist. If Shang Wuxin weren't able to recognize the scent of blood coming off of him, she would have mistaken him for a regular playboy. "This prince hasn't gone to look for your excellency has actually come for me first," Shang Wuxin stated in a cold voice as she stared at the dumbstruck Han Xianhao. "I don't know whether your excellency has come to repay a debt of gratitude or to take my life." Han Xianhao showed an awkward expression under the dim light. Ever since the day he'd returned from the mountain forest, he had inquired into the youngster who had saved him. He knew the boy would come find him eventually, since he still had to fulfill 3 wishes. That boy wouldn't let go of such a benefit. But he didn't know how long it would take before the youngster looked for him. What if it was a few decades later? Thus he'd sent some of Han Xinghouse's spies to carefully search for the boy. However, he didn't get anything, almost making him believe he had dreamed it all up. Searching without results day after day, he grew more and more uneasy. It was a situation he had never experienced before. He found the youngster pleasing to the eyes, so he wanted to get to know him. Right around then, Han Xinghouse received the task of killing the crown prince. At any other time, he wouldn't have gotten involved in such a job. But currently, there were many rumors flying around about the crown prince, most of them positive. Moreover, Han Xianhao was in a bad mood and needed to find someone to vent on, so he came in person. He didn't think Shang's crown prince would in fact be the same youth who had saved his life. Han Xianhao was glad he had come over personally. He'd found the boy at last. But recalling his reason for coming as well as the injured imperial guards outside, he hesitated a bit. He was afraid that he would get resented for his deeds. "My apologies." It was Han Xianhao's first time to apologize in 18 years. "I wasn't aware you were the crown prince. Han Xinghouse will take responsibility for today's losses. As for the guards, I will try to compensate the crown prince's household as much as possible." Shang Wuxin didn't really mind about that. If she minded, she would have already gone out and prevented the guards from getting injured. In a way, today's attack could make the residents even more secure. It was the necessary price for their growth. Who was it that wanted this prince's life today? Under the moonlight, Shang Wuxin's face shone with an eerie glow. Even her words seemed to have an unclear meaning. Seeing that Shang Wuxin wasn't blaming him at all, Han Xianhao relaxed at heart. His lips formed an enchanting smile as he thought of the person who had forked out quite a sum for Shang Wuxin's life. Even though she sent a palace maid in her stead, the one who wanted you dead should be senior consort Qin of the imperial palace. "Do you want me to help you get rid of her?" Shang Wuxin found Han Xianhao's offer a little unexpected. In the end, no matter how dazzling his smile looked, he was still a killer as well as the lord of Han Xinghouse. He wasn't a kind-hearted person who would meddle into other people's affairs. As one of the 3 conditions? Shang Wuxin asked with a faint smile. Han Xianhao felt a little depressed at her heavily guarded heart. Why was it so difficult to show his good side? "Of course not," Han Xianhao said helplessly. I won't renege on those 3 conditions. Though she didn't understand why he would do that, Shang Wuxin didn't care. She separated the people around her into 2 groups. The ones who didn't mean her harm, like Han Xianhao right now. She would leave those alone. Then there were the people who obstructed her way and put her in danger. Their existence was unnecessary. No need. This prince won't exhaust the revered lord over such a trifling matter, Shang Wuxin said indifferently. A mere consort Qin wasn't worth her attention for now. Furthermore, it wasn't yet time to deal with her. Done speaking, Shang Wuxin walked behind the curtains intending to go to sleep, while leaving Han Xianhao standing on the other side in frustration. The corners of her mouth twitched when she heard him leave the bedroom. After Han Xianhao came out of the residence, he found his subordinates waiting for him as they called out, "Lord. Starting today, any matter pertaining to the Crown Prince's household will be reported to me. Also, if anyone else brings money to assassinate the Crown Prince, first report to me. If I learn that any of you have forgotten their duty, don't blame me for being ruthless." Han Xianhao threw an overcast look at his black-clad subordinates. No trace left of the enchanting appearance he had shown in front of Shang Wuxin. Yes. The men shook in fear. Although their lord's outer appearance was exquisite, his heart was black. The number of subordinates that had died in Hanxing House was countless. Han Xianhao looked at the distant crown prince's residence, feeling pleased. He finally knew who the boy was. It was unexpectedly Shang's crown prince, Shang Wuxin. In the future, he could come and see Wuxin. Shang Wuxin, XN. Han Xianhao kept daydreaming, completely unaware of the gentle smile present on his face that petrified the gathered killers. Meanwhile, in the crown prince's residence, Wu Ju came to and entered the bedroom, but didn't go past the curtains. She heard the crown prince speaking from inside, "You're injured, go rest." Wu Ju felt relief as the crown prince was all right, but she wondered what had actually occurred between Hanxing's lord and him. Could it be that the crown prince had won? However, she was aware that it wasn't her place to pry. She quietly withdrew from the sleeping quarters, just in time to bump into Chief Hai, who was rushing over. "Is the crown prince all right?" Chief Hai was about to burst into the bedroom, but Wu Ju blocked his path. "Chief Hai, there's nothing wrong with the crown prince. He's already resting and it's inconvenient to disturb him." Wu Ju was worried that the crown prince would get annoyed if Chief Hai really rushed in. That's good. Saying so, Chief Hai went to handle everything. After all, the injured guards needed to be treated. He probably wouldn't get any rest tonight. The early morning sunlight spilled over the crown prince's residence like a layer of gold. Chief Hai had already dealt with the mess left over by the previous night's fight. The injured guards were also being taken care of in the rear court. That place had always been vacant, so they had placed the bodyguards there. It could be considered their dwelling. Moreover, the rear courtyard was the furthest away from the front courtyard and they were unlikely to disturb the crown prince. Chief Hai's considerate way of handling things really satisfied Shang Wuxin. "Crown Prince." Wu Wei and Wu Ju both stood at the bedroom's entrance. Earlier today, Wu Wei had come back and had heard about last night's unrest, causing her to blame herself. She wanted to handle her side tasks as soon as possible. As the crown prince's personal maid, she ought to take care of his everyday life. If anything had happened to him last night, she wouldn't have been able to wash away the guilt even if she died 10,000 times. Since the 2 of them didn't get a reply, they moved to stand outside the bedroom. After waiting for a long time, they finally heard a voice coming from inside and respectfully walked in. Wu Wei started combing the crown prince's hair and arranging his clothing, while Wu Ju tidied up the room and the bed. "Why did you come here after returning, instead of resting up?" Shang Wuxin asked as she glanced at the mirror's reflection of Wu Wei combing her hair. When it came to her own people, she had a very lenient heart. Not to mention how highly she thought of the useful and devoted ones. Looking at the crown prince's fine black hair, Wu Wei couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Compared to him, all the palace's consorts and princesses were inferior. Listening to his caring words, she said, "This servant isn't tired. Being able to wait upon you is this servant's good fortune." Shang Wuxin didn't have much else to say. Since Wu Wei was willing to serve her, she regarded her as a very competent maid. Glancing at Wu Ju, who was in the middle of putting the bed in order, she said, "You got injured last night. A bit later, go out to train with Wu Wei, so you can protect yourself better in the future and become this prince's strength." "Many thanks, Crown Prince," Wu Ju happily replied. Watching these two, a hint of warmth flowed in Shang Wuxin's heart. Their ages weren't much bigger than her own. She was worried that if she kept being as cold as usual, the two maids would be apprehensive whenever they faced her. Although it was a good thing to be feared, being feared too much was only a burden. In addition, she intended to nurture the two of them to become her left and her right hands. Therefore, they didn't only need skill, but also self-confidence. Though that wasn't something that could be improved in a short time. "You've come so early today. Is there something the matter?" Shang Wuxin asked. Because the two of them were her personal maids, they resided in the same courtyard so they could serve in front of the sleeping quarters at any time. However, she didn't like having people outside her room when she was sleeping, so she made them go rest at night. "Crown Prince, young Master Huan Mo Che has come to the residence to tutor in writing. Crown Prince ought to receive the guest," Wu Wei stated. Even if she knew that the Crown Prince didn't put the two mentors in his eyes, and she also believed he was quite intelligent and didn't have a need for mentors, it was after all the Emperor's decree. Moreover, young Master Huan's motive to suddenly volunteer as a tutor for the Crown Prince was too suspicious. But no matter what, they shouldn't rashly offend him. Oh, he showed up unexpectedly early. Due to the toxin remaining in her body since birth, she couldn't avoid easily tiring out, even if her martial arts was outstanding. Furthermore, she was originally the type to pay attention to her sleep, and she had a hard time getting out of bed, so she usually woke up very late. Since the two maids had shown up outside her sleeping quarters, she was roused comparatively early, but she didn't expect the so-called first son of the capital to also come so early. What could be the reason in the end? Since he came, let Chief Hai entertain him. Shang Wuxin stared at her own tied-up hair, then at her androgynous facial features. Because she had recently started sleeping without the binds around her chest, her breasts had slowly began to grow. It was rather troublesome. But Wu Wei looked at the Crown Prince and said with some intent, "Young Master Huan has been waiting for you in the Great Hall, saying he wanted to instruct you in writing." Chief Hai was basically unable to convince him, nor drive him out of the residence, so he could only let him sit in the Great Hall. Mentioning about that, Wu Wei also found it quite strange. Who didn't know that this young Master Huan was very difficult to deal with, not even giving face to the princes and princesses? Yet why did it seem like he wanted to cooperate with the Crown Prince now? Should this servant make young Master Huan leave? Wu Wei asked. Shang Wuxin took a look at her own neatly arranged clothes, then said with a smile, "I'm afraid you simply won't be able to make him leave." A person who wasn't in any official position, yet he could make the nobles and the officials follow him, as well as have the princes and princesses fighting over his favor. How would Wu Wei ever be able to get rid of such a person? Shang Wuxin unhurriedly strolled into the vast great hall of the Crown Prince's residence, at once noticing the gentleman sitting there. He was dressed in light blue clothes, his silky black hair loosely draped over his shoulders with a single jade hairpin binding it. As he was leisurely sampling the tea, holding the cup with both hands, he presented a simple and elegant, yet tranquil image. This kind of man deserved the capital's first son title. It was exactly this type of countenance that let people feel cleansed and peaceful. But unfortunately, Shang Wuxin disliked Huan Mo Che at a glance. Not for any other reason, but because he had a pair of striking peach blossom eyes on that neat-looking face, making his appearance all the more intense. Shang Wuxin recognized him as the man she had met eyes with that day on the street. Huan Mo Che also realized that someone had come in and put down the tea to stand up. Greeting the Crown Prince. No matter how popular he was in the capital, he didn't actually hold a government post. Meeting the Crown Prince, he was still required to salute. At ease. Shang Wuxin walked up to the seat of honor and no longer looked down at Huan Mo Che. On the other hand, Huan Mo Che slightly raised his head to study the Crown Prince. That day they had met eyes, but they had been too far apart and the crown prince had been sitting in his carriage. Thus Huan Mo hadn't been able to clearly see his face. As he took a careful glimpse now, he couldn't help getting a shock. The crown prince was dressed in a light purple brocade robe today. Whenever the edges of the robe fluttered a little, they would draw an elegant arc. A jade hairpin held his hair together, without any unnecessary decorations. He was incomparably graceful with an innate noble aura. No flowery clothes or precious stones could match him. Covering up his appearance, they would only seem lacking and inappropriate. His pair of sharp black eyes were like a deep abyss. Ever since the day Huan Mo had seen that pair of eyes, they kept invading his mind. So when he heard that the emperor wanted to find mentors for the crown prince, completely outside of his own expectations, he had agreed to do it. Now that he saw those eyes, as well as the crown prince, Huan Mo thought his heart felt rather comfortable. Notes, edit pending. My nickname for Huan Mo is Machi, need you ask why? Also Huan sounds like Juan, Kakik, Don Juan. Suits his peach blossom, seductive eyes. By the way, my nickname for Han Xian Hao is Shameless Boing. I get sidetracked a lot. I tried finding a suitable pic for Huan Mo in my stash. The peach blossom eyes and the neat look peach blossom eyes again, and a scholarly look, more playful though. This one looks gentle and mature, and the eyes and the hairstyle seem close to the description. I kinda decided on those three. Variety is nice, happy face. Huan Mo hits a wall. Why did young Master Huan want to meet me today? Shang Wuxin asked as she sampled a mouthful of the newly refilled tea. Looking at the crown prince sitting on the top seat, each action and every movement of his was full of elegance. Curiosity sprung up in Huan Mo's heart. He'd stayed in the capital for a very long time, and although he'd never met the crown prince in person before, the hearsay was all about his incompetence. But how was it possible for such a person to be a pushover? On the contrary, this kind of talented person was a dragon among men. Huan Mo had seen all of His Majesty's sons, but none of them could compare to the young man in front of him. If the crown prince had only been putting up a pretense before, then why had he stopped now? The crown prince should call this young master tutor. As a tutor, I'll take on the responsibility to teach with impartiality, Huan Mo stated with a smile. Moreover, His Majesty has issued an imperial decree to let me guide you well, requesting the crown prince to not make things difficult for me. This prince appreciates young Master Huan's thoughtfulness. However, recently, my health has been out of sorts. I'm afraid I cannot learn from young Master Huan. Shang Wuxin said, looking at the teacup in her hand, if young Master Huan doesn't take offense, the gardens of this residence aren't bad for viewing. This prince will go take a rest. Done speaking, she got up, ready to depart from the great hall. But not waiting for Shang Wuxin to leave the hall, Huan Mo followed closely behind her. A gentle smile was still hanging on his face, yet Shang Wuxin sensed that he was the type to hide his innermost thoughts beneath a temperate surface, like putting on a mask. However, when would people like them reveal their true face to others? It seemed that if Huan Mo didn't have a pair of peach blossom eyes that resembled his, Shang Wuxin would have also appreciated such a person. Since the crown prince is this young master student and the student is feeling ill, whether in the capacity of a tutor or a member of this country's populace, I should still attend to you either way. Huan Mo stated, deaf to any objections. Naturally, he was able to tell that the crown prince didn't like him, or was maybe even disgusted with him, but no matter how much he thought about it, he couldn't remember having done anything disrespectful toward him. The two of them were genuinely meeting for the first time. Moreover, he was fiercely interested in the crown prince, so he wasn't opposed to becoming a shameless tutor like this. Shang Wuxin paused in her footsteps and glanced at Huan Mo, her discontent absolutely clear. However, under her sharp gaze, he still looked back at her cool and composed with a small smile. With thick sincerity spilling out of his eyes, he suggested, "Isn't the crown prince feeling unwell? Would you like for this young master to call for a court physician?" Wu Wei and Wu Ju looked a bit taken aback by Huan Mo's actions. Even Chief Hai was puzzled. Young Master Huan's behavior was too unusual. At this moment, Huan Imoche was also aware he was acting abnormal, but he felt like teasing this blank-faced boy. It appeared that his own mood turned particularly relaxed around the crown prince. Shang Wuxin didn't pay him any attention, as she was unable to make him leave, nor could she just kill him. In addition, she knew Huan Imoche's martial arts was definitely not low. In that case, ignoring him was good enough. Shang Wuxin didn't return to her sleeping quarters. After all, that area was very private. Even if she didn't have the awareness of a woman, she still guarded her privacy closely. As a result, she entered the study and started practicing her writing distractedly. It was under the pretense of practicing, but it was actually in order to calm her own mind. Because her mind was disturbed, it required peace. Huan Imoche peeked curiously at the youth practicing calligraphy at his desk. He knew the crown prince hadn't entered school as a child, and the emperor hadn't sent people to teach him how to read and write either. It looked like the crown prince had many secrets. Huan Imoche's disposition was obviously very serene and apathetic, yet he didn't understand why he had such a strong interest in the crown prince. He came to the boy's side, intending to examine what kind of handwriting this mysterious crown prince was practicing, but a simple glance shocked him for quite a while. The characters on the paper were solemn and refined, exceedingly graceful and outstanding, powerful and distinct. A skillful, neat and steady writing with a bold and unconstrained style. Even he couldn't compete with this kind of skill. He reckoned that the crown prince's casual writing practice sheet was enough to make everyone fight to obtain it as a piece of art. Good characters, Huan Imoche uttered in admiration. Looking at the writing, his appreciation rose even further. It appears that the crown prince's erudition is higher compared to this young master, making me truly ashamed to act as a mentor. I don't know whether it's possible for you to consider me a friend henceforth? Huan Imoche wished to become acquainted with the crown prince not only out of admiration for his literary talent, but also because he wanted to find out the mysteries behind him. Besides, the most important point was that he himself wasn't fully clear why he liked the crown prince so much. Huan Imoche shook his head on the inside. It was a rare thing for someone to be capable of earning his notice. Young Master Huan is the first son. This prince has humble talent and shallow learning. I'm afraid we don't have much in common, Shang Wuxin declined. No matter whether Huan Imoche's request was heartfelt and sincere, it was simply impossible for her to befriend him. Those pair of eyes were a grief she was unable to escape, reminding her of her former naivety. Even if it wasn't the same person, they were still able to draw out the dark demons in her heart. Hearing the crown prince refuse that way, Huan Imoche's heart sank. Even he didn't recognize what kind of feeling it was. Disappointment? No, they originally had no relations, it wouldn't be so easy to make friends. Anger? No, although his pride was high, he wasn't arrogant. It was as if he had eaten something bitter, he couldn't help frowning. I was too offensive. Asking the crown prince not to mind it. Huan Imoche feigned a silly smile, but the excellent pretense held some traces of strain. Shang Wuxin didn't care about Huan Imoche's oddness. Even if such a handsome man stood in the middle of her study, she would remain unmoved and do her own thing as usual. Huan Imoche also turned a blind eye to the crown prince's obvious neglect, sitting in the study and observing as he managed his matters. There wasn't much going on, yet Huan Imoche felt himself at peace. The day was soon over, while Huan Imoche didn't want to leave. Though the crown prince hadn't spoken more than a few words, he really liked this feeling. He found that the best thing he'd ever done was volunteering to be the crown prince's tutor. Watching as Huan Imoche left the residence, Shang Wuxin's eyes quickly darkened. Crown Prince. Chief Hai came to the study and spoke as he looked at the emotionless boy who was standing inside. Tomorrow is the emperor's birthday. The crown prince ought to attend as the East Palace's representative. What are your thoughts on this? Chief Hai asked. If it was like before, he would have arranged everything in advance. But the current crown prince's thoughts were hard to fathom. How would he dare try to guess the crown prince's mind as he pleased? Looking at his uneasy appearance, Shang Wuxin smiled and helped him straighten up. How would this prince not recognize Chief Hai's painstaking efforts for my sake? To me, Chief Hai is like a father. Since I've made you handle so many affairs, I have complete trust in you. Chief Hai's eyes teared up. As an eunuch, although he was the head servant in the crown prince's residence, in reality no one had ever looked up at him. But listening to his words now, Chief Hai felt like his family's crown prince was the kindest under the heavens. How can this servant receive your heavy regard? Being able to serve you is this old servant's good fortune, Chief Hai said as he lowered his head, afraid that his tears would flow down in front of the crown prince and offend his eyes. It's fine, Shang Wuxin said with a smile. You're the head servant in this residence, don't undervalue yourself. Yes. Chief Hai stood beside the crown prince and asked, then will you take part in the birthday feast tomorrow? The emperor's birthday was a big deal every year, yet the crown prince had never participated before. More importantly, the emperor had also never inquired after him. Over time, everyone became aware of the emperor's indifference for the crown prince. I'll go, why shouldn't I? I'm the crown prince. If I don't go to such an important banquet, only those rats would profit. Looking at the jade ornament in her hand, Shang Wuxin smiled wickedly. That round jade ornament was her imperial mother, Empress Qiu's personal item. After her death, it became Shang Wuxin's. Its color and luster were beautiful and it was warm to the touch, making Shang Wuxin quite fond of it. Therefore, she often held in her hands and toyed with it. Is this the birthday gift? Chief Hai asked. The residence had undergone many changes, and who knew what Wu Wei was tasked with doing outside? Recently, Wu Wei was put in charge of the accounts office, but Chief Hai was certain that the crown prince's household was very well off. Birthday gift? Shang Wuxin quietly started telling instructions to Chief Hai, while his eyes showed astonishment and a faint concern. Nevertheless, he went along with the crown prince's plans. Seeing Leng Yufeng for the first time, Shang Wuxin had woken up early in the morning, but because it was so early, her mood was very bad. It was like another layer of ice was added to her originally cold and detached expression. Crown Prince. Wu Ju approached the side of the crown prince somewhat timidly, looking at him as he gracefully ate his breakfast. Pondering it over, she still spoke resolutely, "May this servant attend to you today?" During this period of time, she had started to admire the crown prince more and more, and her respect for him had grown. Furthermore, she had also gradually started wishing to become stronger, hoping that she would be entrusted with heavier responsibilities and be qualified to act as his right hand. She was already different from before, when she had merely felt like wanting to protect the crown prince, whom she'd never met before. Now she wholeheartedly wished to be an important subordinate, even though she was just a woman. Wu Wei was also a woman, yet she was always there at the prince's beck and call. Wu Ju believed that she herself would not disappoint him either. After hearing her words, Wu Wei, who was in the middle of serving the food to the crown prince, nearly dropped the chopsticks within her hand. She was already well aware of Wu Ju's intelligence and strength. If Wu Ju had run into the crown prince first, perhaps she would have been even more competent than herself. More importantly, after spending so many days together, Wu Wei could clearly see Wu Ju's devotion. They had even become good friends in private, partly for the sake of the crown prince. She also wanted to know whether he would lead her with him when he entered the palace today, but she didn't dare ask. After all, she still remembered the last time. It had let her understand that only if she was formidable enough, she could protect herself. Otherwise, she would be a burden. Shang Wuxin put down her chopsticks. Since she had gotten up too early, she didn't have much of an appetite. Listening to Wu Ju's words just now, her mood improved a little. This is a birthday feast, not Imperial Father's personal summon. Of course I can bring you to with. However, once you enter the palace, concentrate on watching and listening, and don't speak too much. This prince hopes that you won't stir up any trouble. Do you understand? Wu Ju was delighted at heart, while Wu Wei promptly saluted, "Many thanks, Crown Prince. This servant respectfully obeys to do my duty. I won't bring you any inconveniences." They were very clear that while the Crown Prince looked like a solemn celestial being, he very much disliked troublesome things. Shang Wuxin nodded in satisfaction. However, you're my people. You can't let others bully you. It's good if you don't stir up any trouble, but if there's anyone provoking you, you shouldn't lose face for this prince. If anything happens, there's still me to shoulder the responsibility. Yes. Wu Wei and Wu Ju both nodded heavily. Being able to stand by the Crown Prince's side was their lives' greatest fortune. Crown Prince, the carriage is ready. Should we set out for the palace now? Chief Hai asked from outside the door. Thinking of the present the Crown Prince had prepared as a birthday gift, he still felt a little anxious. But he also knew his fears were groundless when he called to mind the prince's intelligence. Anyway, even if His Majesty really got angry at him, the current Crown Prince would most likely not care a whit. Shang Wuxin got up and took the handkerchief in Wu Wei's hand to wipe her hands, then taking along the two maids, she walked toward the carriage parked outside the residence. But as soon as she went out, she noticed a tall black carriage made of incense wood. Though she didn't know how it looked on the inside, judging only by the exterior, she could realize its great value. Whose work is this? Shang Wuxin asked without any facial expression. No one was able to tell whether she was happy or displeased about this. Chief Hai promptly ran up to Shang Wuxin's side and said with a smile, "It was this old servant who ordered it. Do you like it?" Previously, it was because the Crown Prince's residence had been too poor to afford such extravagant things. But now that they were so well off, they shouldn't put their Crown Prince in any inconvenience. When he saw how much money the residents had, he had immediately discussed with Wu Wei about making the carriage. How would Shang Wuxin not realize Chief Hai's intentions? She nodded her head. Chief Hai has done very well. This prince likes it a lot. She entered the carriage while speaking. Sure enough, the interior was arranged completely to her current preferences. Simple, yet luxurious. More importantly, it was comfortable. She was someone who always treated herself well. Since she had the qualifications to live in comfort, why would she want to inconvenience herself? When he heard that the Crown Prince was satisfied, Chief Hai laughed giddily. Combined with his round stature, that laughing face made him appear that much happier. Even Wu Wei and Wu Ju couldn't help smiling, let alone the other guards, who all laughed stealthily. The usually solemn and fearful Chief Hai could actually be this amusing in front of the Crown Prince. Hearing everyone's laughter from inside the carriage evoked a small smile on Shang Wuxin's face as well. What a pity that no one was able to witness that smile, or else who knew how many maiden hearts it would steal. The ones who drove the carriage were Wu Wei and Wu Ju, while the Crown Prince's imperial bodyguards were gathered around it as protection. Looking at that formation, everyone had an enormous curiosity about the Crown Prince. Nowadays, the citizens were circulating favorable rumors that the prince was keeping a low profile and biding his time. But unfortunately, the Crown Prince had never shown himself in front of those citizens. Let alone them, even the imperial court's officials had never seen him. And since the Crown Prince still hadn't reached 16 years of age, he couldn't attend court yet. Thus, the reason so many officials had come to today's birthday banquet was the Crown Prince. Whoa, is that the Crown Prince's carriage? Looks like it's quite big and attractive. I wonder if he's inside? Female whispers spread across the streets. Who among the common women didn't wish to marry into the imperial household? They previously thought he was simpleton, but listening to the recent hearsay, many people had started admiring the mysterious Crown Prince. It has to be. Take a look. None of the other princes' carriages can compare. I wonder what he looks like? Could he be very ugly? Wu Wei and Wu Ju got furious when they heard some woman say that the Crown Prince was very ugly, but they also knew they couldn't do anything at this time. They kept thinking on the inside, if they let those people see the prince's face, no one would be able to speak such words. Even if they searched high and low, they would perhaps only find a few people in this world whose appearance could compare to his. Hearing the various discussions outside, Shang Wuxin didn't seem to care at all. It could be said that the commoners were often the most artless and authentic, but even more often, the most heartless and cruel. They only saw the things on the surface. However, public opinion was actually a good thing to put to use. Crown Prince, we've arrived at the Imperial Palace. Wu Wei's voice conveyed. Shang Wuxin didn't have to exit the carriage where the rest of the officials and young ladies did. Since she had the crown prince's privilege, her carriage was allowed within the palace grounds. That was within the crown prince's rights. When she heard that, Shang Wuxin slightly lifted the vehicle's curtain to let the inspecting imperial guards by the entrance clearly see her face. As it was an obligatory inspection, she naturally wouldn't defy it, but she also wouldn't let others frivolously examine her for too long. At that moment, Shang Wuxin detected someone's line of sight on herself. Though it didn't carry any malice, the feeling of being looked up and down was too strong. Faintly frowning, she looked toward the owner of the gaze. That person was dressed in black, sitting straight on horseback. His chiseled face seemed to be personally sculpted by a deity. Even when he was quietly sitting on horseback, his charm and unusual good looks were obvious. Exceedingly graceful, he gave people a somber and desolate feeling. He had wheat-colored skin, smooth and dewy. The star-like eyes adorning his outstanding face were particularly noticeable, calling people's attention and difficult to disregard. Who is that person? Interest flashed within Shang Wuxin's eyes. That man was very much to her taste. One glance was enough to tell he was a genuine rugged man to his blood and bones. Wu Wei followed the crown prince's line of sight, then lowered her head to say, "That person is Shang's famous general, Lin Yufeng. He's also your mentor. In 2 days he will go to the crown prince's residence to instruct you in military studies." Because she already knew that he would be the crown prince's tutor, she had already thoroughly investigated him. But that general truly was a man that made people feel admiration for him. Shang Wuxin put down the curtain, while the carriage slowly proceeded inside the palace. Cunning Palace's beauty Leng Yufeng kept looking at the departing carriage a little distracted. Was that the crown prince? Truly outstanding. When he returned to the capital the previous day, he had received the emperor's decree, making him into a grand tutor for the crown prince. He had found it very surprising then. After all, he was making a general into a tutor. It seemed like His Majesty's intentions were clear, but if the emperor really had those intentions, why would he pretend to disregard the crown prince for so many years? He hadn't given the crown prince even half of the usual rights. Though Leng Yufeng didn't want to get involved in the deliberation hall's inner intrigues, he was probably unable to escape that since the day he became a general. When he saw the crown prince's carriage a moment ago, he had wanted to catch a glimpse of him. It was just a glimpse, but even he had no choice but to praise the crown prince's good features, as well as his imposing manner. However, those were all things that didn't concern him. When the time came, he would immediately depart for the border area and leave this complicated capital behind. His heart was full of the hot-blooded battlefields that he liked most. "Yufeng, why aren't you going in?" Huan Emoche, dressed in blue clothes, was watching his good friend, who was sitting on horseback seemingly lost in thought. The sight had stirred up the young ladies into throwing him stealthy peeks. Leng Yufeng composed himself and upon seeing his pal Huan Emoche, quickly leapt down from the horse. He said happily, "How come you're here?" As far as Leng Yufeng was concerned, attending these banquets was a boring affair. However, his status didn't allow him to skip out on them. He didn't anticipate that his friend would also come, as he rarely showed up for the previous birthday feasts of the emperor. It's because I was afraid you'd be bored alone in the palace, so as a good friend, I've come to keep you company." Huan Emoche spoke some half-true, half-false words. Although he didn't hold an official position, he still had the title of the capital's first son. No matter what kinds of small and large feasts were hosted in the palace, he always received an invitation. In the previous years, he wouldn't necessarily attend even once, but thinking of the crown prince now, he had finally decided to show his face in the palace. Though the crown prince was very intelligent, he didn't have much authority. Moreover, people's hearts were obscure within the palace. If something really happened later, as the prince's grand tutor, he could take care of the problem. Leng Yufeng threw a glance at Huan Emoche, obviously not fully convinced by his excuse. Although they were close friends, and he trusted that if it came to life and death, they wouldn't betray each other, they definitely weren't such kind-hearted people. Where would they have so much time to come and waste it at this useless event? Even if they had some, they would be better off using it to get a good sleep. It's been only 1 year that we haven't seen each other. Emoche, you've started to speak so insincerely. Leng Yufeng scoffed coldly. After that, the two of them walked side by side toward the inside of the imperial palace. The two of them, one was a callous war god, the other was a gentle young master. Whether their status or their appearance, both were far above everyone else. Adding their ability to their status, the two of them were highly coveted by countless women within the capital. However, neither of them had ever glanced at a woman twice. A crazy rumor had started spreading that the general family's General Leng and the Prime Minister family's young Master Huan were gay lovers. When the two of them had learned about it, they had been indignant at the time, but had later thought it might be all right if it made those women stay further away from them. As a result, they had clarified things and had let the rumor circulate. Moreover, they also felt that it was impossible for them to fall in love with a girl like ordinary people did, so they had never put much importance on their own marriage matters. Thus, as long as the two of them showed up anywhere together, they would receive numerous female gazes filled with pain. Do the words spoken by these common people hold some truth? Huan Emoche smiled tauntingly. He had encountered too many two-faced people. His friendship with Leng Yufeng wasn't only based on mutual appreciation, but more than that, it was because both of them were sincere in their feelings. Why, looking at these people's manner, I'm afraid what kind of rumors will spread about us around the capital tomorrow. Huan Emoche observed the gathered women, some of them obviously blushing in admiration, others looking jealous. Aversion flashed through his eyes. Leng Yufeng indifferently swept the surrounding people with a glance. Sure enough, there were many people who minded their business, but plenty of them were furtively sizing them down as well. What was more, they were discussing them in whispers. However, Leng Yufeng didn't care at all. If he really minded, he would have already clarified everything long ago. It's actually all the same to me. In any case, I'll go to the border area before too long. As for you, who knows how many female hearts you'll hurt? Leng Yufeng stated with a spiteful smile. So quickly? Huan Emoche frowned. Every time Leng Yufeng returned to the capital, he would only stay for a few days, then immediately ride back to the border. Huan Emoche knew that there weren't any disputes at the borders currently, yet Leng Yufeng wasn't willing to return to the capital even for the Lunar New Year's celebrations. It seemed that, you still can't let go of that matter? Both of their hearts had been wounded and scarred over. Perhaps because they had similarly experienced a bitter past event, the two talented men could understand each other well. There's nothing to let go of, I've already taken my revenge. Staying at the border area for so many years isn't because I'm hiding away, but because the capital is too dull and there's nothing of interest here. Might as well have fun at the border. Leng Yufeng said, but his expression turned colder. Even if he had let go of those certain matters, he still felt agitated on the inside. What about you? When will you start? You've been preparing for so long, it ought to be enough. Leng Yufeng asked with some concern. It can't be that you're unable to start. Huh? Huan Emoche sneered. Unable to start? That won't happen. Soon enough, he'll get the gift I've prepared for him. Huan Emoche could have struck a lot sooner in the past several years, but he wanted to see him climb much higher. Falling when he was at the peak of his excitement would be that much more painful. You've entered the Crown Prince's residence as a Grand Tutor. I wonder, Leng Yufeng asked, a little curious. He rarely got interested in others. Even when he knew that he shouldn't get involved with the Crown Prince, he kept thinking of the youngster he had seen just now, and couldn't control the need to ask about him. Noting his pal's apparent interest, who knew why, Huan Emoche suddenly didn't want to let him know of the Crown Prince's excellence. More than that, he didn't want his good friend to become his Grand Tutor. He wished that he would be the Crown Prince's only mentor. Then later, he could also become his personal friend. Nothing special. Huan Emoche put on an appearance as if he'd said too much, making Leng Yufeng give up on asking further. After all, it was just a little curiosity. The Crown Prince was merely a stranger to him. Leng Yufeng brushed aside the lingering impression of the Crown Prince from his mind. The two men's respective thoughts turned to the banquet held at the Great Hall, as they made their way there. As for Shang Wuxin, she didn't directly go to the Great Hall, but rather avoided the crowds by entering the most peaceful dwelling within the palace. It was precisely her imperial mother's, Empress Qiu's dwelling, Cunning Palace 1. Shang Wuxin hadn't come there to grieve. It was nothing more than the fact that it was peaceful, so her ears could enjoy some quiet. Crown Prince too, it's very beautiful here, Wu Ju said, gasping in admiration. Although they were still somewhat apprehensive of the Crown Prince, they had slowly started to relax around him after being in contact for a while. Looking around, Shang Wuxin found that while it was an empress palace, it didn't have a luxurious beauty about it. Instead, it was exceptionally refined and serene in all respects, while the courtyard was full of fresh flowers. Those flowers weren't any rare or precious breeds. The birthday feast in the Great Hall. The luxurious Great Hall was full of ministers and their families sitting inside. The brightly dressed women were sitting beside their respective parents, frequently looking over the rich young masters. At the top of the Great Hall were seated several imperial concubines. Though the emperor had many concubines, there were only 3 present today. Emperor Shang was wearing a bright yellow informal robe, sitting at the highest seat. His pair of shrewd eyes were brimming with strength as he occasionally glanced at several ministers. Those ministers appeared respectful, but in fact, they were all a little afraid. "Your Majesty, everyone's gathered. We might as well begin," Consort Exen said with a smile as she looked at the emperor. She was wearing a purple palace attire, while her face was finely made up, making her appear sweet and charming. Her hair was rolled up in a bun, supported by a golden pearl hairpin that sparkled and dazzled the eyes. She was separately decorated with numerous other pearl and jade ornaments, entirely covered in jewels. Consort Exen had a son and a daughter. Her son was the 3rd Prince Shang Qingying, while her daughter was the eldest Princess Shang Qinmi. Consort Exen was an arrogant and willful mistress within the palace, often acting like a spoiled child irrespective of the occasion. Yet Emperor Shang had never shown any discontent with her. After all, ever since knowing Empress Qiu, he had never visited another consort's chambers again. Even though Empress Qiu had been dead for 13 years now, he had never called upon any concubine to serve him in bed. "Everyone? There's still someone who's not here. The East Palace's crown prince has actually not come to the emperor birthday. That's highly improper," Consort Qin stated resentfully. She was wearing a snow-white flowing brocade dress, while her beautiful hair was left down. Her pretty face looked a bit charming and her demeanor was stylish. But when she mentioned the crown prince, her glossy eyes darkened with hatred. Consort Qin was an elder at the palace. At the time the emperor was still a crown prince, she was already his side consort, so she was also the first one to give birth to a prince. Unfortunately, her child hadn't been conferred the title of crown prince. Consort Qin only had this son, the eldest Prince Shang Qinzhao. Consort Qin's words made everyone take a look around the Great Hall, but they didn't find the rumored crown prince. Their hearts were unavoidably full of doubts. Could the rumors among the commoners from the previous days be false? Was the crown prince still that worthless crown prince they knew? Huan Emoche's brows creased for a brief moment, finding Consort Qin's words too harmful to the crown prince. So his circumstances had always been this difficult. Thinking of that graceful and keen youngster growing up in such a dirty environment, Huan Emoche was suddenly filled with disgust for Consort Qin. So much that he felt like saying a few words in chastisement to her. If it weren't for his formidable self-control, he would have probably really done so. However, why did he want to do such a thing? Just because he was the crown prince's mentor? Leng Yufeng determined that the crown prince really wasn't inside the Great Hall and couldn't help but wonder. He obviously saw him enter at the palace gates, but the crown prince wasn't currently here. What had actually happened? Could it be that he had run into some problem, or did simply not wish to attend the birthday banquet? Saying things like the crown prince being afraid and similar guesses, Leng Yufeng couldn't accept those as true, because the look in the crown prince's eyes was as fearsome as those of the wild beasts he had seen before. What would that kind of person be afraid of? Consort Qin smiled complacently. After the crown prince had schemed against her son in the streets, Minister Bai had really come to the emperor to say that the eldest prince wasn't well-mannered. His Majesty had ordered her son to stay put in his residence and reflect. He wasn't allowed to go out even for the emperor's birthday. It had turned Consort Qin into a target for ridicule by the other concubines in the imperial palace. Emperor Shang kept sitting with a face that showed neither joy nor anger, making people speculate whether he still loathed the crown prince as before and also revising their own views of the prince. They wanted to get a hint from Emperor Shang's expression, but as an emperor, he had learned to conceal his emotions long ago, so that no one could guess his inner thoughts. Is the crown prince really so audacious that he still hasn't come yet? It can't be that he doesn't put the emperor in his sights. Consort Xian's hand covered her mouth, yet her voice was clear enough for everyone to hear. But it wasn't like everyone around was so brainless that they couldn't figure her out. The other concubines didn't utter a thing. Not all the concubines within the imperial palace hated the crown prince initially. But because Empress Qiu had seized all of the emperor's love, it had made them resentful. Emperor Shang's heart wouldn't let another woman inside. How could such a love not make the numerous concubines jealous? But as Empress Qiu was already dead, the resentment had shifted onto the crown prince instead. As a mere concubine, you actually dare speak behind this prince's back? I wonder what filthy thing Consort Xian's mouth has eaten today? A low voice, cold enough to freeze people, rang from outside the main hall. Everyone realized that the crown prince had come, so they turned to look at the main hall's entrance. While Huan Emoche's expression loosened up as his heart calmed down, Leng Yufeng blanked when he heard the crown prince's words. The crown prince seemed to be fairly unrestrained. Everyone noticed when the youngster wearing a black brocade robe entered the hall. What astounded them was the youth's breathtaking features. He had a fair complexion with a certain frailness to it, yet that didn't decrease his appeal. His eyes were tranquil without a ripple, but so clear, one could see the bottom. There wasn't a single impurity within them. They seemed able to absorb a person's heart and soul. He had a delicate but straight nose bridge. The corners of his lips were pulled back in a gentle smile. He was like the spring rain in March, subtle and delicate. Watching the crown prince, something briefly flashed through Emperor Shang's eyes, before it disappeared as though it never existed. The whole crowd was astonished by the crown prince's looks. It wasn't that none of them had seen him before. Even though he rarely came out, there were ministers who had already met him. But each time, the crown prince would hang his head low, so no one could clearly see his face. Thus, it was the first time for everyone to witness the crown prince's exceptional countenance. He didn't lose to the top place holders of the beauty rankings among the young noble males. In fact, he was more remarkable than them. Even the two most outstanding men in the Great Hall, General Leng and young Master Huan, couldn't compare to the crown prince in terms of appearance. It wasn't that their looks were inferior, the three of them each had their own strong points. However, the crown prince's eyes and his body seemed to hide many secrets, and that sort of mysterious appeal amplified his extraordinary looks. Greeting, Imperial Father. Shang Wuxin didn't care a sliver about everyone else's expressions. After she entered the main hall, she bowed slightly in salutation. Although it wasn't the kowtow required by etiquette, there was nothing inappropriate about it when it concerned the East Palace's crown prince. You've come? Emperor Shang didn't even glance at the crown prince below him. That made many believe that he wasn't fond of the crown prince as usual. The emperor spoke without reserve. Come take your seat. Shang Wuxin nodded, then walked toward the special seat designated for the crown prince. The seat was below the emperor's, conspicuously positioned first on the right. Below that was Leng Yufeng's seat, then Huan Emoche's. Crown Prince. Leng Yufeng and Huan Emoche greeted at the same time. Leng Yufeng thought the prince was out of the ordinary, so he decided to say something. While Huan Emoche felt his mood improve as soon as he saw the crown prince for whatever reason, so he couldn't help but open his mouth to speak. Shang Wuxin nodded in response. No matter what, those two men held enormous influence within the imperial capital. As long as there was no need to, she wouldn't make them her enemies. Moreover, Shang Wuxin was absolutely certain that those two weren't as affable as they presented themselves. No, they didn't look that gentle on the surface either, but many couldn't see that. At that moment, the people who felt that the crown prince's position was hopeless suddenly got a shock. The two men, who had greeted the crown prince on their own initiative, were actually General Leng and young Master Huan. When had those two ever taken the initiative to greet any of the other princes before? It seemed that there really was something different about the crown prince, but recalling the emperor's earlier manner, many kept wavering. Everyone hesitated over what move to make next. Should they, or shouldn't they support the crown prince from now on? You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.